"What are you?" she asked with a kind of terrified fascination. Still not able to let go of her curiosity. "Something more than you will ever be. I am Hesperus, I am Valmic. I am the spirit of the air. I am the oldest thinking creature in the galaxy. Older than the oldest shattering, and I can see through you like thin smoke." Then he lifted his hand from her shoulder and touched a finger to her lips. He made a shushing sound, "No. Don't try to kill yourself. You can't turn yourself off now. No matter how much you want to, that time has passed." Beneath his grasp, the torso flexed once. I wanted to look away. I told myself that it was just one robot, sucking information from another. A neutral exchange of information between two machines. Now Hesperus declared, "The Stardam, tell me what you really want with it. Cadence. Then we'll talk about putting you out of your misery." Chapter 37. Aconite's signal had left Naomi at the speed of light, but it had to catch up with ships that were moving nearly that fast within a day of departure. By the time it reached us, it was red-shifted so heavily, stretched, so far outside the usual recognition band pass, that at first, our ships did not identify it as a Gentian transmission. "I wasn't expecting to hear back from Naomi so quickly," Charlotte declared. Bethany shook his head. "This can't be about the Stardam. They contacting us about something else. The only thing to do was play the transmission." Copies of Aconite Imago appeared on our bridges. Even before he had spoken, the expression on his face told us everything we needed to know about the nature of the communication. It was not going to be good news. "There's no easy way to do this," he declared, speaking slowly and clearly. "I've just been talking to Mycerian concerning the interrogation of Grilsa." She dashed all our names past him, all 1,000 shatterings. Even those we know died circuits ago. She was looking for a flicker of recognition, a sense that the names meant something more to him. With his brain spread out like a carpet, it was a simple matter to monitor his responses. Was she got something? She got hits, more than a dozen. He knows her, of course. And me and the other shatterings, he's been interviewed by since we captured him. A handful of us he'd have heard of before. He's a Marceline. We all go back to Abigail, Lud Miller, and the Golden Hour, and he had a prior interest in the line. It all adds to the noise, but still Mycerian found something she couldn't ignore. She got a name that she wouldn't have expected. Otherwise, a hit that couldn't be ascribed to a great popularity and fame, a shattering known to Grilso, who was never involved in the interrogations. A shattering who is alive, still amongst us. I allowed myself a moment's rest, but so the problem was at Aconite's end. Not ours. He was just keeping us informed, but Aconite was still talking. If I could have found a way of sending this information, selectively, so that it reached only those of you I wanted to hear it, I would have done so. But the protocols don't allow for that. And in any case, even if I managed to encrypt the message, the signal itself would still have been visible. It would have made no difference, I think. He'd still know that his name had been uncovered. He drew in a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to disclose. "We think it's Gollingale Gross's hit may be spurious. Only he will ever be able to confirm or deny that, but we can't think of any reason why he'd show such a strong reaction to that one name, that one face. He knows Gollingale. That makes Gollingale the infiltrator, the traitor, the one who has always been with us. Of course there may be others, but someone had to bring Campion's thread to the attention of our enemies, the ones who committed the ambush, and if Gollingale is the traitor, then we don't need to look any further to know who killed Sci-Fi." The Margot gave a half smile. "Speaking of Campion, I hope you're hearing this, old man. You were right about Sci-Fi. There was something wrong, but the rest of us were too. Blind to see it, she sent us a message. Not from the grave exactly, but during that long fall, when she was pushed from her balcony, She knew who'd done it. She'd seen him clearly. She knew she was going to die. Nothing in the city could save her. And she knew a fall from that height wasn't survivable, even with lion medicine. But she was still a clever girl. And she tried to get a message through to us. The rings, I declared quietly. Bethany was puzzled. The what? Campion knew something was wrong. Aconite went on oblivious to our interruptions. He couldn't put his finger on it. And maybe we wouldn't have been clever enough to see it if we had. But taking Grocer's reaction into consideration as well, there's no doubt Sci-Fi swapped her rings from her left hand to her right. Campion noticed it and knew something was wrong, but he just couldn't place it. But we had imagery of Sci-Fi and the records made of her body after the fall. When we compared them, the rings had moved. She had time to do that as she was falling. It was all she could do. She couldn't scratch his name into her skin. She knew there wasn't going to be much of her left to recognize after she hit the benevolent structure. But the rings, they'd survived the fall, and she hoped we'd realize their significance. She wanted us to see that something was wrong, that she was murdered rather than just fell by accident. And moving her rings was the only mean. She had to tell us that. It wouldn't have given us Gal and Gale, not that easily, Tansy declared. But if we had a hint that he was already implicated, as we do, Bethany declared. We have to stop him, I declared. Bethany sent a command to freeze Aconite's transmission. The rest of it could wait until we had dealt with this most urgent of matters. According to the tactical forecast, Gallingale would be within attacking range of Silver, Wings of Morning, in less than 5 minutes. He's got the signal by now. Henbane declared he knows we know. Bethany reopened the channel to midnight. Queen Gallingale, we need to talk. If you've seen Aconite's transmission, then you'll know we have reasonable grounds for concern. Our fears may be unfounded. I know and trust you well enough to feel certain that is the case, but I can't dismiss them out of hand. Abandon your attack and return to the rest of the pursuit fleet, and we'll take it from there. If he abandons the attack, he's innocent, I declared. But I don't think he's got any intention of doing that. Charlotte gazed at me as if I held all the answers. Do you think he's working for the machine, his kingdom? No, he's doing everything he can to stop them reaching their destination. Charlotte narrowed his eyes. That still puts him on our side, doesn't it not, while Purslane's still breathing? We waited for Gallingale to respond, but he held his silence just as I had expected. What need did he have to talk to us now? We had allowed him to get exactly where he wanted to be. Unchallenged, I had been right to doubt his courage when he first volunteered. Despair had the attack against Silver Wings. It was not so much that it had been out of character, as that I had never really known the real Gallingale, hiding amongst us, reporting back to his masters in the residence of Sons. For all I knew now, he was the bravest of us all. Incoming transmission, Bethany declared suddenly. Gallingale, no Purslane. I braced myself. I was going to have to tell her about Gallingale's likely plans, even though there was little she could do to protect herself. Campion, she declared, I've got some news for you. It's not great. Drawing a breath, the strain coming through in her voice, she continued. Hesperus managed to capture cadence. That's not as good as it sounds, since we still don't have control of Silver Wings, but at least we've managed to have a look inside her head. You're right about the Star Dam. That's where we're headed. There's a single-use opener somewhere aboard my ship. I don't know where exactly, but the robots wouldn't have taken her if they weren't certain of that. They know more about us than we do. Campion, she seemed to stumble. Losing her mental thread, I could feel the tiredness, each word costing her immeasurable effort. The Star Dam isn't what we think. It's one of ours installed by Genshin 9, but it wasn't put there to contain. The light from a dying sun, there's something else inside it. Something we don't know anything about. Or at least it's buried so far down in our memories that we can't see it yet. Maybe you're doing a better job than me. I don't know. The point is there's something bad in that star dam. But it's not a frozen supernova. It's going to be worse than that. I was listening, but at the same time, nothing she was saying was reaching my ears. I hold to the playback of her transmission. Plus Lane, listen to me now. We know that Galactic is the traitor. The one who brought the ambush down on us. The one who killed Sci-Fi. He's going to use more force against Silver Wings than we'd ever risk if Cascade is listening in. He needs to know that as well. Are you insane? Agrimony-mouthed. I paused the transmission. No, I'm not insane. I just rather Cascade killed Galactic, while Purslane's still aboard the ship, but the robot's objective matters less to me than keeping Purslane alive. I felt my face flush with false bravado. I want his put us back as well. We owe him that much. If you've got a problem with that, you'd better turn your weapons on me now. We still have more than 60,000 years to go until we reach the Star Dam. I'm not giving up on her now when we've barely begun. Let Campion continue his transmission, Bethany declared. I fought to keep my voice calm and level. There isn't much more to say. If Cascade has control of Silver Wing's weapons, then he should use everything at his disposal to take care of Galactic. That doesn't mean I'm not going to keep trying to stop him. Once Galactic is out of the picture, when the transmission was sent, I allowed Purslane's recording to resume. This is what you need to know. She declared the machine his kingdom weren't the first. Long before they arose, there was another machine civilization. Let's call them the first machines. It'll do until we find out what they called themselves. How they began doesn't matter now. What does matter is that they never became a significant force. In galactic affairs, the first machines died, wiped out by an artificial contagion. I sense vast resonance. Purslane holding back more than she was telling. That's as much as Hesperus can tell me at the moment. She declared he only knows what Cadence knows, and she did everything she could to block his intrusions. Why was she lying, as I surely knew she was? Not because she wanted to keep information from me, but perhaps because she was certain that Cascade was listening in. Read between the lines, her voice urged. The first machines died, but not all of them. Some fled before the contagion could reach them. They're in that Star Dam locked inside. That's where they've been for millions of years, waiting for a chance to escape. Champion, you need to understand that there's every chance. They don't mean us well. We locked them in that Star Dam for a reason. We as Genshin line to Cadence and Cascade. The first machines are like vanished gods. They're everything that the machine his kingdom are. Only faster, stronger, clever, and they've had millions of years. Locked inside that thing to keep improving. The machine his kingdom want to set the first machines loose, to let them spread into the galaxy and use up the human meta civilization. That's what this is about, Campion, not about cracking open the Star Dam to knock out a few local civilizations, but to take down humanity. We're the old order. The meat civilizations, the robots, were wise enough to realize that if they didn't take steps to wipe us out, sooner or later we tried to do it to them. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea if Galactic won. After all, Sorrel declared. I wanted to hate him for it, but there had been no spite in his words. Only a cold assessment of the situation. The worst part was that I could no longer be certain that he was wrong. Chapter 38. Hespera stepped away from the broken, limbless metal-eyed doll that had once been Cadence. He had been probing her for further signs of life, making certain that she had not just pushed herself into a deep, camouflaging coma while some stealthy, shielded part of her mind plotted her next counter move. "Look away," he declared, before dousing her with the energy pistol. The tongue of burning things reached my nose when I gazed around. Cadence was just a smoldering black pile, with blue embers flickering from her wounds. "She won't trouble us again," Hespera declared. "You didn't enjoy having to do that. She was one of us. She risked her own existence for the goal. She believed in genocide." Not exactly. She was genuinely convinced that the organic would never tolerate the continued existence of machine intelligence. There was no hatred in her conviction, only a sense of the utmost urgency. And now I have reached into her mind and strangled something that was once luminous and alive. He offered me the energy pistol. No, it didn't please me, but it had to be done. I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, Hesperus. You must wonder why I don't see things the way Cadence did. His question made my skin crawl. It's crossed my mind. In some ways I do, given the evidence at our disposal. Only a fool would put any faith in the organic and the machine living harmoniously for the rest of time. Cadence was right to fear for the future existence of the machine, his kingdom, and right to let the first machines out of the star dam know her concerns were legitimate. But her actions were a mistake, although they were founded on sound reasoning. I will still do everything I can to make sure that Cascade does not complete his mission, up to and including destroying the Ark. That will be the last option when all else has failed. He paused for a moment and declared, "Now you must enter Rebellance until Galactic's attack has passed. I was awake during the last attack. This will be different, I think. The attack and the response will both be fiercer. I think it likely that there will be undamped stresses of a severity that you would find uncomfortable. Cadence and Cascade weren't trying to keep me alive. Last time were they?" Hesperus answered as if he was revealing some immense, traumatizing truth to a child. "No, your survival was incidental to their main objective. They were only interested in the opener. They have been following intelligence, but their knowledge is incomplete. Cadence's memories suggest that they have already found and used one opener, but they were wrong about the stardam in question. It was not the one they wanted to open, although they did not know that until the opener was used." I shook my head in stunned disbelief. "Oh, got it. Pant the consensuancy. Are you saying they did that? It was an error. They opened the wrong door and wiped out an entire civilization. The mistake was of no consequence to them, merely a setback. They reanalyzed their intelligence, everything they had learned of the line, and found that all the evidence suggested that the opener was aboard Silver Wings of Morning, but not knowing precisely where to locate it. They could not risk damage befalling any of the ships in your bay." He glanced at Cadence again, as if to reassure himself that the child remains. "Could not possibly be listening in. Where is it exactly?" "That's the problem. I don't know. Then we will have to look for it and try to sabotage it. All of which must wait until we have survived Galactic's attack." The nearest of Bayan's casket was only a short walk from the command deck. There were 4 units ranked against the wall, all of the same rounded rectangular white design, like squared-off eggs. I don't like stasis, nonetheless. Stasis will protect you better than freezing. I will intervene to assist in your emergence back into real time should difficulties ensue. Hesperus opened the white doors of the nearest unit, revealing the white-on-white intricacy of the casket's interior. Stasis machinery, throne control, and containment systems. Packed as tight as intestines, the chair pushed itself out, inviting me to lower my body into its doughy embrace. Controls nestled under my fingertips. What ratio and time duration should I dial in? I'll deal with the settings. I don't want you emerging until we are certain that Galactic isn't going to pose a threat to gain. Claustrophobia slipped its bony Cold fingers around my throat. What if I don't come out? I'll be here to make sure you do. Do you have something to say to Campion? Before I put you under, I settled into the majestic throne, placing my hands and feet into the self-tightening. Restraining hoops, isn't it a bit late for that? You forget that. I am a high-fidelity recording apparatus. Say what you will, and I will relay it to Campion. As soon as communication becomes possible again, tell him that I love him, and I'm grateful that he came this far. No, say it to me as if I was champion. I took a breath. It felt unnatural to be looking into his golden face, trying to imagine my lover and friends standing there. Instead, I love you, Chatling. Thank you for what you've done. Do whatever you can to stop Silverwings, but look after yourself as well. I want to see you again. I want to watch the sun go down with a good glass of wine and talk about all this as if it happened a long time ago, before we had many more adventures and good times, Ewell Hesperus declared. The seat retracted into the stasis cabinet, the restraints tightening to pin me in place. Hesperus closed the doors. I could still see him through a one-way window. A collar whirred into place around my neck and drew me deeper into the seat, firm enough to be uncomfortable but not enough to choke. A voice intoned a warning that I was about to go into stasis at a time compression ratio of 1 million, and that I should activate the emergency abort control immediately if I did not wish the field to snap around me. Final warning, the voice repeated. Stasis will initiate in 3, 2, 1. Hesperus vanished, blinking out of existence. The outside world flared blue and then settled slowly back to an illusion of normality in the second. It took me to think that I had been in the cabinet too long. 10 days had passed in the real time of my ship. Hesperus was either dead or he had tricked me. My fingers moved over the tactile controls. I twisted the dial back down, feeling it click through the notches of ratio settings. 1.1 million 10,000, the voice declared. Please be advised that manual adjustment of the cabinet settings is no longer possible. Only external inputs are now recognized as valid. Tens of seconds had passed, 100 days. Silver Wings of Morning had already been traveling so close to the speed of light that her onboard time was flowing. More than 20 times slower than planetary time, she was still accelerating. 100 days of ship time was 2,000 days. In the stationary universe, I could have held my breath since I had been put into the cabinet, but we had already crossed 6 years of space. Another 6 since I started thinking about the distance. I had come 12 years, more like 18 by now, or 20. In a very short while, Silver Wings of Morning would have put more than a century of flight time between itself and Naomi in barely a day of cabinet time. We would arrive at the star. Damn Hesperus, I declared, you lying bastard. Chapter 39. He smashed and bloodied ship fell towards us with no pseudo thrust at nothing but the ghost and friction of interstellar space to slow her down. Midnight Queen could only coast, not accelerate. 1 part in 1,000 less than the speed of light. Was mercurially swift by the standards of almost any other physical object in the universe, but Dalians and the other ships of the pursuit squadron were now traveling slightly faster. Going Girl's wounded craft had no choice but to tumble back along the opposite vector, and soon it would fall within attack range of our ships. We kill him, Sorrow declared. No ifs, no buts. We don't even let the bastard explain his actions. Just open fire. I'm first in line, Charlotte declared. Still bruised from the loss of steel, Breeze Gollingale, as far as he was concerned, was just as much to blame for the demise of his ship as the robots. He wanted something to punch. I understood how he felt, but I kept thinking how good it would feel to get Galingle's throat between my hands and keep squeezing. I would make it nice and slow, ebbing the breath from his lungs across the same stretch of time it had taken Cypher to fall from her room She had known she was going to die, that no agency in the universe could prevent it. Let Galactic taste something of the same furnace. Dry certainty a long-range strike from a gamma cannon was never going to give the same satisfaction. But Bethany declared quietly we could use his ship. Maybe we can use Galactic too. If he still has something useful to tell us. But we can definitely use the ship. It's damaged, I declared. But fixable, everything's fixable, especially given the resources we still have. Aboard our own ships, Midnight Queen was always the fastest. Out of all those that survived the ambush, excepting Silver Wings of course. Midnight's out of the race now obviously. But that doesn't mean her engine's useless, if we can pull her in. Fix her or recover the drive components, it may make a difference. None of our ships will be able to close the gap. If Silver Wings pulls ahead again, Midnight Queen could still be able. I hated it, but I knew he was right. Bethany's got a point. How about we spare him with a gamma cannon, and then pick through the remains? Agrimony asked as if that was a reasonable proposal. Bethany acted as if he had not heard him. I'll intercept Midnight Queen with Adonis Blue. I'll only need to make a modest course correction. To meet her, I'm the only one aboard my ship, so there's no need to put anyone else's life in danger. Adonis Blue isn't immense enough to carry Midnight Queen, I declared matter of fact. Daliant is about the only remaining ship with a hole. Large enough, I have lamprons now match velocity with Galactic's. Wreck and drag it back home. We'll worry about the hold afterwards. I'm coming with you, I declared. You don't have to campion, let the risk be mine. Now I'm coming before he could raise another objection. I declared, do you have an intercept course worked out already? Yes, he declared equivocally, but I'm still not joyful with your choice. Get over it, you know. It makes more sense to take dalliance. Frankly, I don't even need you at all. Then I suppose this is stalemate. Bethany held my gaze, daring me to blink, then shook his head in disgust. Or defeat or some weirdy combination of the two. Follow me, Shock Diamond. Snowstorm and Chromatic Aberration hold the pursuit course. We'll rejoin you as soon as we have the wreck. Adonis Blue veered away sharply. Not so much breaking acceleration safeguards as forgetting about them completely. The old Dalians could never have kept up with her. But she was more agile since Ateska's upgrading from my position in the bridge. I watched the other 3 ships fall into the distance, time-like, stretching until they were a third of a second away. Adonis Blue swerved again, and then resumed its original course, except that it was now moving along a parallel vector. As near as could be judged, it was now on a precise collision course with the out-of-control Midnight Queen. Did you have your suspicions? Bethany asked me as we waited for the wreck to tumble. With an intercept reach of the lampreys, about Galactic I mean. There was something comradely and confiding in his tone, as if I had finally absolved myself in his eyes. Not an inkling, I told the Margot. Me neither, I can't help but think of that as a failing. You know, I thought I had my finger on the pulse of the line. I thought I knew all of us even before the ambush. After it happened, and the line was little down to so few of us, I felt I knew every surviving shattering. As well as I knew myself, we always suspected there was a snake. After Sci-Fi died, there wasn't much doubt, but if it's any consolation, I'd never have fingered Galactic as the culprit. Even after that business with Ugarit Panth, I thought that was your mess, not his. Well, maybe I started it, but it gave Galactic the perfect excuse to push the ambassador over the edge. He showed him the entry for the consistency in the UA, established beyond all doubt that the ambassador's civilization was extinct, could have been an innocent mistake. Bethany started on second thoughts. Probably not. Nothing innocent about it. Galactic wasn't the first chatteling Ugarit Panth spoke to. fishing for information after my indiscretion, but Galactic was the only one. Who came up with the idea of letting him see the UA, rather than the troves the ambassador told me? He'd been interested in seeing inside the UA before he went to Galactic, but I can't help wondering if there wasn't a degree of manipulation going on there. Galactic just happening to mention the UA or making sure someone else mentioned it. With an earshot of the ambassador, it served his purpose. He was able to disclose the real facts about the ambassador's home civilization. Without implicating himself, at best he would get away with it, without anyone knowing he'd suggested it. At worst, it would just look like another indiscretion. Oh, Gridgepants came to me. Bethany told me what had happened. I could have acted then, but instead I agreed to protect Galactic. I felt sorry for the bastard. I kept seeing myself in his shoes. Whereas all along what he was hoping for, counting on, was the ambassador taking it so badly that he triggered the suicide mechanism inside his own body while still inside Emir. That would have taken care of the rest of Genshin Line pretty effectively. And Galactic as well, Bethany declared, not necessarily. He could easily have contrived a reason to leave the planet in a hurry if he suspected the ambassador was going to blow. In fact, that's exactly what he did do. The day after Sifil's funeral, Galactic very conveniently managed to get himself assigned to patrol duty. He must have been hoping the ambassador would kill most of us afterwards. He would have been able to pick off any survivors from space. But he didn't know about Cadence and Cascade's plans. No, they took us all by surprise. Of course, he would have been hoping they would die, along with the rest of us. But at least he was already in space in a fast ship, and in a good position to embark on the chase. We should have seen all this, but we didn't, so there's no point burdening ourselves with recriminations. Maybe if I'd picked up on Sifil's clue sooner than I did. Don't you start, it's bad enough that one of us feels. He could have done more, we're human, champion. That's all it boils down to. Human, and not nearly as clever as we thought we were. When it counted, end of story. When they put up the gravestone for our species, that will be the epitaph. You think anyone will be around to care? Bethany opened his mouth to reply when something caught his attention. I heard the chime of an alert. Here it comes, champion. I'm releasing lampreys. I watched the bright sparks erupt from the fat green hull of Adonis Blue and streak away in hyphens of light, decelerating massively to reach the rest frame of Galactic's wreck. I dropped 20 lampreys of my own and sent them to assist. Dallians had had plenty of time to replace those lost in the passage through the reunion system when I had been attacked by the ambushs. The lampreys needed no direct supervision from us. They were fully capable of grasping the nature and specifics of their task, which was to fasten onto the wreck, stabilize it as well as they could, and then hold it back into the accelerated frame of. Dallian send Adonis Blue. All Bethany and I were required to do was watch the proceedings with nervous impatience, aware that we were falling slowly behind the rest of the pursuit squadron and would have to sacrifice even more of the already tattered safety margin to make up the distance. We keep him at arm's length, I declared, until we know he's dead and hasn't set his ship to self-destruct on us. I got the impression you'd have quite liked to get your hands on him. Was it that obvious? A few minutes later, a chime signaled that the lampreys had made contact with Midnight Queen, approached and locked onto her hull without encountering resistance. Bethany and I surveyed the damaged ship, both of us doubting that Galactic could have survived the attack unless he was in abeyance. Acres of hail had been peeled away, revealing knotted vulnerable ends. Maybe we should abandon it now, Bethany declared, as images of the mangled craft played before our eyes. There can't be much left to salvage from that. The drive panel might be tiny and well shielded. I declared as if he did not know that already. We've come this far, I'm not going back empty-handed. The lampreys began to hold the wreck towards our ships. I drummed my fingers, my heart, and my throat. We should send a probe aboarded. No time, dear boy. There are a million places. Galactic might have hidden himself away. It would take us weeks to search. Every nook and cranny of his ship, he was right. I just did not want to be reminded of the alternative. If a physical search was out of the question, this could be a ruse, which is why it would have been a much better idea for you to remain with the other ships, but there was no rancor in his voice. If anything, he appeared grateful for my company. I'm going to bring Adonis Blue in close. I'll be ready for an attack, but I won't raise impasse until the last moment. That way at least we'll know one way or the other. I don't like this. No one's asking you to like it. What matters is that you mustn't stay around. If things turn unpleasant, if I can't handle myself, you aren't going to make much difference. Race back to the other 3 ships and see what you can do on this. Maybe then you can help me. But one ship must survive to continue the pursuit. That's imperative. Would agreed on that. There's been no word from Purslane since Galactic attacked. Silver wings, but she's alive. Don't ever doubt that. Bethany allowed the lampreys to drag their dead prize closer to Adonis Blue. I held Dalian's position, keeping a clear 10,000 kilometers between her two vessels. Bethany's toad-shaped ship was larger than Midnight Queen, but not by such a margin that he could have swallowed her. Inside his hold, he remained on pseudo-thrust and brought his weapons to attack readiness, but kept his impasse lowered. 10 more lampreys sprang from his hold to provide skin thrust should he need to raise the shield. There was 100 kilometers between the 2 ships, then 10 at 1 kilometer squashed together. By my angle of view, they already appeared hopelessly fused. As if they had rammed together, I saw it a moment before I saw Bethany's reaction. Either he was slow or his impasso was not as effective as he had led us believe, taking valuable fractions of a second to reach operating strength. The ruined hull of Midnight Queen, the hull I had already observed to be peeling away, in damaged plaques exposing delicate insides, splintered apart in an explosion of curved and jagged shards. The instant it happened, I diagnosed it as a catastrophic terminal failure of the ship's integrity. Midnight Queen finally breaking up stresses, picking apart a ruined corpse. The next instant I saw the truth. The vulnerable innards were merely another layer of camouflage that peeled away in the same eruption. There was another hull under all that deception. Dark, sleek, intact, a dagger within a dagger. I screamed a warning to Bethany. It was too late, the damage was already done. His impasse raised, but not swiftly enough to prevent chunks of that deceitful llama from raining onto Adonis Blue, gouging vicious wounds into her own hull. Then a long row of weapons emplacements sprang open along the vicious edge of Galactic's dark new ship, turning it into a savagely barbed instrument, and at least a dozen gamma cannon muzzles rammed forth and concentrated their fire on Bethany's vessel. The impact deflected some of that energy, flickering like an electric blue bubble as the photons downshifted into the optical, curdling with thick squirming lightning as field asymmetries washed over its volume. But the attack was sustained and at devastatingly close range, and Adonis Blue had already been wounded by the hull shards. Despite all this, Bethany's lampreys started returning fire, whiplashing around the other ship, etching coils of light as their skein drives gashed space to its fierce marrow, stabbing at the straubing. Impasse Galactic had raised around his own ship, occasionally when their discharges coincided with a lull in the straubing field. They found their mark, but the impact did less damage to that dark hull than I would have anticipated, picking it away in dark scabs, but never reaching through to anything vital, denied the ability to use pseudo-thrusted. Full efficiency, both ships began to fall out of my accelerated reference frame. That impasses were merging, forming a dumbbell shape. As they tried to establish a minimum surface area solution, I was reminded of ancient sailing ships, engaged in close quarters combat, their rigging tangling up, locking the two adversaries together unto the death. A scratchy voice, not even Animago, declared, "Get out of here, Campion. Get out of here now." "Bethany," I began. "Just go." He declared, "Follow Purslane. Bring her home. Tell her I made a terrible mistake and that I'm sorry." I spun Dalliance around and boosted away from the two embattled ships, the consoles shrill with warnings of my imminent doom. I had crossed less than half the distance, back to the other shatterings, when one or the other of the two battling ships became a scalding point of light, swelling until it had filled the entire misshapen, double-lobe, Dimpasso bubble with stained white radiance. The radiance tore against the limit of the bubble, and then punched through with the fury of a miniature supernova. It was axiomatic that no ship, no part of a ship could have survived such energies. Bethany had sacrificed himself, done one last deed for the lion he loved so much. He had made errors and enemies. He had miscalculated and misjudged, but in my eyes at least, in the last instance of his existence, he had redeemed himself utterly. But he had not killed Galingale. We did not see it at first. It was camouflaged to the point of invisibility, and modest, enough to register as just another piece of fused debris. Spinning away from that fireball, it was Henbane who grew suspicious, and turned Shock Diamond away to investigate, vowing to rejoin the chase when he had satisfied his curiosity. What he found was a black egg, wrapped in a shell of impasse. It was no more than 10 meters across, and appeared to lack any means of moving or steering itself. We knew exactly what it was. Galingale had hoped to escape, to fall through space, until he felt it was safe to signal his presence. 1,000 years from now, 10,000, 50,000, he would be hurting through the airspace of another part of the Meta, civilization separated by time and space from the knowledge of his crimes. He would alert the locals to rescue him, and they would gladly oblige, even if it meant pushing their science to the limits of ingenuity, even if it took them centuries or thousands of years to accomplish their task. None of that would matter to Galingale as long as someone found him. Before he sailed beyond the edge of the galaxy, Henbane signaled him some dull mechanism, brought Galingale out to the bands. His imago appeared on all our ships. Beaming with delight at his own survival in ton, he declared, "Greetings, cosentients of the human meta-civilization I am." There was the briefest of pauses as he searched his mind for a new name. Something other than Galingale Campion, a shadowing of Gentian line, a survivor of the ambush against our line. "I have been traveling for a very long time, ever since my ship was destroyed at near light speed. Humbly I beseech your assistance in decelerating me to planetary speeds so that I may recontact any other survivors of this most heinous of crimes. My survival pod carries a true, rich in the science and culture of a million societies, the contents of which I would be glad to share with anyone in a position to assist me." He folded his hands across his lap and beamed again. "I await your response with interest." "Hello, Galingale," and Bane declared. "Sorry to spoil things, but you haven't been asleep quite as long as you planned. A little under an hour if you want the brutal truth. It must only have been then that Galingale paid proper attention to the chronometer in the cramped little space of his survival pod. He let out a sound that was almost a laugh, as if acknowledging the cosmic joke that had just been played on him. "Quite," he declared. I don't think Champion's going to be too thrilled about that little white lie you just told. I'm certain he won't. Galengale scratched the border of his metal eye. Sorry, Campion, if you're listening and had to do it. It's not as if I could go around calling myself Galengale anymore, is it? I do found you eventually, I declared. Given your evident determination, that wouldn't have surprised me. But you know what, it was all for nothing. I didn't stop the robots, and I don't think you're going to stop them either. Why did you do it? I asked. The same reason we do anything. Because it's what I believe in. The residence of suns matters more to me than the residence of flowers. The residence of flowers is just one part of the commonality. Take it away and the whole stack of cards wouldn't come tumbling down. But the residence of suns underpins everything. I asked, what is the residence of suns? What you always believed it to be. Another line operating in secrecy. Created by the commonality to make sure our involvement in the extinction of the first machine. State a secret. Nice name. By the way, he smiled. Yes. I was listening in on Pursuline's conversation. She didn't say anything about us being involved in any extinction. She just declared they died out. Yes, and she was keeping something from you. Should have had her reasons, but the sad so did truth of it is that we stabbed the first machines in the back. Give them the poison chalice, made them die in agony. Just like the ghost soldiers in Palatial, we didn't really mean for them all to drop dead. But that's no excuse, is it? We were looking for the means to kill them. And all of a sudden, oh dear, we did kill them. I absorbed this truth provisionally, slotting it into a mental file, but not yet making any emotional connection with it. How did the residence of suns operate? Where's Bethany? He asked, suddenly. Bethany's dead, that's why I'm asking the questions. Poodled Bethany. He did his bet. You know, just didn't have quite what it took. I'm still waiting for an answer to my question. He exhaled a massive world where he sighed. The residence of suns was designed to enforce and police the line self-administered amnesia. It wasn't enough just to forget about the claim. We committed against the fast machines. Jensen Lane and the other complicit lanes had to be actively prevented from rediscovering the evidence of that crime, so that's what we did. For 5 million years ever since, the lines decided to wipe the story of the first machines from their collective histories. We've been in the shadows waiting and watching. We've always known the truth. Someone had to be trusted with it. It's been our duty to monitor the activities of the lines and any other high-level civilizations and make sure no one ever puts the pieces of that puzzle back together. And for 4 of those 5 million years, it really wouldn't have mattered that much. If anyone had were human, we'd have got over ourselves. But then the machine, his kingdom, emerged. I declared that changed everything. What would you rather have had, Campion? Peace or war? That's how simple it was. We couldn't stop the vigilance collecting data. But most of what they discovered never found its way outside their archives. Then you came along, worked your way into their graces, and discovered something damaging. We knew then that we had no choice. But the next reunion, Jensen Line, had to be wiped out. It was brutal, but what else could we do? The problem was the machine his kingdom already knew. They only had suspicions. We wanted to know that. But it wouldn't have changed anything if we had. You never suspected that. Cadence and Cascade were agents, though. Did anyone? You've got a point. Did you know about the Star Dam? About their plans to crack it open? Not at all, but I knew of the Star Dam. That was something else. We were supposed to be monitoring. What I didn't know was that the opener was in Porcelain's possession. His good. I flared at my incomprehension. It's been 5 million years, Campion. Things are forgotten, even when you're trying very hard to remember them. We were sowing so much misinformation that some of it came back and bit us. We thought the opener had been destroyed, sockets ago or lost. We had no idea it was still in the line's possession, even less that it had survived the ambush. But the robots knew where to look. You know what that means. Before I could answer, he leaned forward in his seat, his face glistening with a film of sweat. They've had space inside the line, so deeply embedded, that even the residents of Suns didn't know about them, learning our secrets, finding out things about us even we didn't know, such as the fact that Pass Line is the custodian of the opener. You can kill me now, I won't blame you. But understand this, no matter what you think of me. Silver Wings of Morning cannot be allowed to reach that star dam. We'll do what we can to prevent that. You don't understand, I'm not even sure Purslane does. Despite what she obviously knows, what she told you about the first machines. Being trapped inside that thing. Yes, that's not the whole story. Our reserves of patience are rapidly diminishing, Charlotte declared. It's a start done, that part is true, but it wasn't put there just to contain the robots. Don't you think we'd have found a way to wipe them out if we'd been able to shepherd them into such a modest volume of space? We'd have used H-guns on them and turned them into a ball of molten slag. The thought had occurred, I declared. The star dam doesn't contain the first machines. They're somewhere else. It doesn't hold a dying star either. What it contains is a door, a mouth and aperture. Gallingale's pale tongue licked his bloodless snake-pale lips. The Priors made it while we were still spineless slugs, swimming around in the oceans of the Cambrian period. They cracked the causality problem, found a way to open a wormhole, large enough for macroscopic transits, that doesn't suffer from the information censorship bottleneck of our own little efforts. You can't crack the causality problem. I declared, it's built into the deep structure of reality. They found a way, champion. Trust me on this. Interstellar transits wasn't the problem. They were joyful with relativistic flight the way we are. 200,000 years to complete a circuit around the galaxy. It's really not that long, once you get into the swing of things. But a travel to Andromeda, or one of the galaxies in a local group, different story. Then you're looking at millions of years. Fuck, we've only been doing language for 6.5 time. To get to Andromeda and back, just still not enough time to make a second trip. Even if we had a main to do it, that wasn't acceptable to the prayers. So they built a wooden hole, connection between the two galaxies. It's been there since they vanished. Dormant but functionally intact at the time of the first machines. It wasn't even recognized for what it was. It was only when they vanished that the nature of the door was established. Did the first machines use it to escape to Andromeda? He smiled at my question, close, but not quite. They got there under their own power at sublight speed. We're only talking about a modest number of survivors. You understand, for a long time, the fact that they'd escaped, that the lines couldn't track them down and finish them off, because the survivors had to be finished off. Even if most of the deaths had been accidental, simply wasn't an issue. They were heading to Andromeda. Nothing could catch up with them, but at least they weren't our problem anymore. Let them get to where they were going. We had our galaxy, they could have theirs. No one expected them to survive and thrive and start doing things. The absence, I declared. Gallingale nodded gravely. Until then, the robots were a distant consultant. They'd made no efforts to signal that existence. And as far as the rest of the galaxy was concerned, Andromeda was still uninhabited. But when the absence happened, we knew things were taking a new pattern. So what is the absence? The signal that the wooden hall had been reactivated. From that moment on, the residents of Suns was faced with a crisis on two fronts. We had to prevent knowledge of the earlier atrocity from ever reaching the present machine, his kingdom, and we had to deal with the possibility that the remnants of the first machines were preparing to return home. We couldn't deactivate the wooden hole. It was far beyond our understanding. But at least we have the star dam in place, a last and only line of defense. Fortunately, it was enough. We could be confident that nothing would ever be able to break through that containment. If a star dam can hold back the fury of a supernova, no weapon known to line science could ever penetrate it. It was holding to in all the years since the absence. Nothing has ever broken through, and now work it out, champion. Kittens and Cascade want the opener so that they can release the fast machines back into our galaxy. That's why it's so vital to stop them. You're not just dealing with a few pissed off robots that have been stuck inside a box for 5 million years. There's an entire galaxy's worth of them, waiting to pour on through. Oh, and I think we can take it as a given that they're not going to be in a reconciliatory mood. We'll do what we can, I declared. But you won't do anything that might hurt Porcellini. You were prepared to kill her. It didn't make much difference to the outcome. I only had one ship, champion. You have 4, but what do I care? It's your problem now, not mine. I've told you everything I know. Not because I give a damn what you think of me, but because I want you to understand how important it is to stop Silver Wings. But I'm done now. I've declared my piece. You can go ahead and kill me. You seem very resigned to it, Charlotte declared. What choice have I got, even with its impasse raised? This pod wouldn't survive a concentrated attack from your ships for very long. Charlotte shrugged. No, it's probably wouldn't. I think I'd seen that it was quick. I shall put myself in a bins, then I won't know a thing. Do what you will with me. Charlotte nodded. We will. Gollingale reached out of view and touched the control restraints. Words sucking him deeper into his chair, he braced himself, like a man expecting an electric shock. Then the red cocoon of stasis locked around him. We can draw straws if you like, Charlotte declared. For who gets to kill him, asked Tansy. For who gets to take him back to Naomi? One of us has to abandon the chase and return home. He declared. He told us everything, but we'd be fools to take him at his word. I agree, I declared. Not that I'm not up for a chase. Sorrow declared, but Snowstorm's already pushed to the limit. I'm not going to imagine. Good if Silver Wings pull some thrust out of the bag. He glanced at Orish, who was sharing his ship. Nothing in her expression declared she disagreed with him. Someone has to go back, I declared. It might as well be Sorrow. Anyone else? Who doesn't want to stick around for the chase? I suggest you make arrangements to whisk over too. Snowstorm as soon as you can. Really though, I think you all should go. Galleons is at least as fast as any of the remaining ships. There's no reason for the rest of you to be dragged halfway across the galaxy. I'd much rather see this through, Tansy declared. Mita Henvine echoed, after a moment's reflection. Then I'll take Gollingale back to Naomi, Sorrow declared. One of us has to go back and let them know what happened out here. They'll never entirely believe anything in a signal, but when I show up in the flesh, I think they'll listen. He singled me out, our eyes meeting for a moment, and declared, I'll speak well of Purslane, Gampion, and you, of course. I'll let the doubters know they were wrong. One day she get to tell them in person. Good luck, Cyril. Get back to Naomi, help the line consolidate. I think it's safe to say that we're going to be out of touch for a while, but we're still gentian. Sooner or later, you'll find a way to get a message to us. I don't doubt that for a second. In a way, I'm almost envious of you, I declared. Missing the singing dunes of Naomi already? Not exactly, but I give a mo. To see the look on Gollingale's face when they pull him out of stasis, especially if the first person he sees is Myssarian. Sharpening her knives, Chapter 40, Beyond the Window. The white-walled room was still as a painting. Occasionally my eyes convinced me that there was a flicker of subliminal movement, but I soon learned not to trust them. At my current level of time compression, Hesperus would have had to spend many hours in the same position just to register to my senses. There was no reason to assume he was out there at all, unless the casket relinquished control to me, as it had refused to do after the stasis first took hold. I stood a very good chance of dying in there. This thought was chasing its tail through my head for the 1000th thought, 10,000th time, when the casket's voice calmly informed me that the transition to real time was imminent. Stasis ratio is now 100,000 and falling. It declared 10,000 and falling. Field stability optimal. The field dialed down from 10,000 to 1,000 through the hundreds into the tens, and then released me. The jazz bindings eased apart, allowing me to slip my hands and feet out of the hoops. I could move my head again. My neck and spine felt as if they had calcified together. I did not like stasis. The door opened with a huff of air, and the chair emerged from the casket. Pushing the discomfort aside, I eased myself to my feet, keeping one hand on the back of the chair for support. It was less than 24 subjective hours since I had last been in that room, but if the cabinet had kept me at a stasis level of 1,000,000 for the entire duration of my confinement, the better part of 3,000 years had passed. Aboard the Ark, I hobbled to a wall and scuffed my hand against the white material, but the absurd expectation that a film of dust might have built up there. My fingertips came away forensically clean. Every surface in the room gleamed with polished newness, as if it was only minutes old. Hesperus, I called, my voice hoarse until I cleared my throat and tried again. Hesperus, it's purslane. I'm out. There was no answer. I breathed in the ancient still air. There were atoms in the room that had not been through a human lung for 30 centuries. Something caught my eye in the adjoining room, visible through the open doorway. A flash of colored and glass, my legs still unsteady. I made my cautious way out of the casket room. I found a white table set for me, with a white chair next to it. Breakfast had been served. There was a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice, a croissant on a plate, a pot of coffee, and a bowl of fruit. There was a bunch of flowers in a vase, and a folded white card like a menu. I touched the croissants and found that it was still warm. I sniffed the coffee. It was dark and strong the way I liked it, and boiling hot. I pulled the seat out and reclined down, grateful to rest my wobbly legs for a while. I poured some of the coffee into a white china cup and held it to my nose, taking in the aroma. Before I allowed myself a sip, I tore off the end of the croissant and stuffed it into my mouth. After a day in the stasis casket, I was ravenous after the first bite. I could not stop myself. I finished off the croissant and 3 pieces of fruit. I got down the juice and drank 2 cups of coffee. Only then did I open the stiff white card. Inside was a message in fine gold writing. It was written in very elegant script, but just a touch too precise to have ever been the work of a human hand. Hesperus had signed it, but there had been no need. He told me that he was sorry he could not be with me on the day of my emergence from stasis, but that he was unavoidably detained elsewhere. He had arranged for the Ark's robot janitors to prepare this breakfast just before my stasis interval was due to expire. He trusted it was to my taste, and so far as he had been able to judge it at the time, he had issued the instructions. He wrote, "My emergence still lay many centuries in the future," but he had been confident that the janitors would execute their orders with due scrupulousness as he had requested. I cannot be certain that I will still be alive when you read this. Hesperus had written, "If I am, then you will find me on the Bridge of Silver Wings. Doing what I may, I should very much like to see you, but circumstances dictate that you must come to me, not the other way around. Before you do, I would urge you to examine the Ark's cargo hold. I believe you will find the contents illuminating before you leave the Ark itself. You must make an assessment of the present dangers. If all is well, you will see an abundance of golden threads leading out of the cargo bay. If you follow them, they will bring you to me. If there are white threads only, it will not be safe for you. If there are golden and white threads, you would be advised to exercise caution. Use the whiskways only if you have no other choice, almost as an afterthought. He had added, I have had the makeup prepared. A spacesuit suitable for your needs. I trust you will find it satisfactory. And I look forward to renewing our acquaintance. I remain your friend Hesperus. Thank you, I declared quietly. I finished my breakfast, then I emptied my bladder, bathed, and had a makeup prepare me a change of clothes. Only then did I start looking around the Ark for other messages he might have left. It was not long before I encountered one of the friends. I was walking down a corridor, trying to find the spacesuit, when I came across an obstruction that had not been there before. A fist. Thick cable punched its way from one wall to the other. At chest height it was white and as smooth as an icicle. But the way the wall material had splintered around the intrusion made me doubtful that it was part of the Ark's own systems. Not long afterwards I found another white branch, this time running across the floor. Then forking into directions, one fork plunged into the floor. The other curved up the wall and went through the ceiling. I strode on the feeling of dread churning in my stomach. In the next large room, I found a cross-knitted tangle of white and gold cables, rupturing through various surfaces, stretching through the air in different directions. Like the strands of a monstrous cobweb, I had to pick and fight my way through the tangle. The cables were stiff and hard. Some of the white ones were wrapped around the gold, and vice versa. It was like vines trying to strangle a larger trunk. Although everything was still, I had the sense that this was a frozen moment. In a titanic struggle, it was the same everywhere I went. In some parts of the Ark, the white cables dominated. In others, the gold, in various critical areas. The white and gold cables were competing for control. Here and there, I found a cable that came to an abrupt, severed end. I kept thinking of Cadence, pushing tendrils from her wounds, trying to connect with any useful system aboard the Ark so that she could work mischief. I was seeing the evidence of something similar, but on a much larger scale. I remembered Hesperus's recommendation that I visit the Ark's cargo bay. I would not have considered going there at all if he hadn't suggested it, my memory insisting that it was as empty as the rest of the ancient liner. But now that he had planted the thought in my mind, I felt a dark compulsion guiding me onwards, as if I was sleepwalking towards a destination known only to my subconscious mind. The going became increasingly difficult. The density of white and gold cables, doubling and redoubling, until it was all I could do to squeeze through. The narrow interstices. There were parts of the Ark that they had left well alone, and parts that they were still fighting for. The cargo hold was clearly of paramount importance. Eventually the obstructions stand out. It was as if I had passed into the eye of the storm, and I found a window offering a view through a thick wall. Into what should have been the unlit space of the hold. The hold was not unlit today, but the light coming through that window was not as steady as I would have expected. It was flickering, tinged with blue and violet. I gazed into the hold, squinting against the brightness. The ox hold was not empty at all. Suspended in the middle, occupying most of its length, was a machine that was both instantly recognizable and deeply unfamiliar to me. It was a series of 8 brass-colored spheres, joined together as if on a spit. The spheres, each of which was easily 100 meters across, were as reflective as mirrors and entirely featureless. I was looking at the single-use opener. It was floating against the Ark's interior gravity, suspended by its own levators. It was also generating an impasse, 8 spherical bubbles, merging into a kind of crimped sausage shape. I could trace the quivering surface of the impasse by the energies flickering across it, forming transient spectral patterns like oil on water. Weapons were arranged around the opener, directing their fire against the impasse. There were a larger version of the energy pistol that the maker had created for me, floating in the air, each weapon trailing a gold cable back into the gold nervous system that Hesperus had cobbed. Webbed around the inside of the bay, I realized then that I must always have known that the opener was in the Ark when I chose this ship as our place of refuge. My subconscious had been directing me, knowing that the robots would be wary of attacking the Ark if they suspected the opener was inside it. And if I had known of the opener, then I had also known of the star damage was made for. On that level, one must also have known of my complicity in the extinction of the first machines long before I needed it spelled out. I left the opener and navigated back through the Ark until I reached the gold-threaded area, where Hesperus had established clear control. It was there that I found the spacesuit, waiting by a high-capacity maker. Hesperus had done well. The suit was an exact fit, and although it was a very long time since I had worn one, the memories came back soon enough. "Hello, Purslane," the helmet declared as it lit up with status icons. "I would have spoken to you sooner, but I could not find an easy route into your skull. I was hoping you would find the suit eventually." I smiled. For all my fears, for all that, I did not know if I would ever see Campion or the other Shadowlings again. It was still good to hear his voice. "You're all right, and so are you." I trust there was something evasive about his answer. I thought, "I am sorry to have kept you in abeyance for so long, but I believed it was in your best interests. There really was no sense in your remaining conscious for the entire voyage, even if that could have been arranged." After Galingale's attack, he was talking about something that had happened thousands of years ago to me. It was yesterday's news what happened. He was unsuccessful in killing me, or in slowing Silver Wings. Neither objective was achieved. Galingale met greater resistance than he had anticipated. His ship was damaged. It fell back towards the other vehicles. There was an altercation during which unpleasantness. Bettany's ship was destroyed. I learned this from Campion during our subsequent conversations. You've been in touch with Campion, not recently, but I have every confidence that he is still alive. His ship Dalliance has been following us ever since, and the others, they've all gone now. Purslane Dalliance is the last one left, but Champion is alive, I am sure of it. He must be in abeyance awaiting you, as of a change in our status. Very shortly he will have it. Where are we? Approaching the Star Dam. We have traveled 60,000 years from Naomi. It was the longest crossing I had ever made in all the circuits since I had left the Golden Hour for the first time. Although I had been half expecting this news, it still triggered a demoralizing psychic vertigo. Human beings were not meant for this kind of thing. We had evolved to grab around within a few kilometers of the same village, in the same time zone, under the same fixed stars. You mentioned that. It might not be safe for me to come to see you, I declared. I think you may take care, but do not be unduly concerned. The Whiskways are safe now. I have secured them in readiness. Come up to the bridge, there is much to discuss. I left the Ark, but not without trepidation, stepping outside for the first time since Cadence and Hesperus had fought each other. I kept expecting to find one of her severed limbs inching across the floor. dragging itself along by a fine silver thread. But that incident, laid tens of thousands of years in the past, as far as the ship was concerned. All around me the bay appeared superficially unchanged. The same looming vastness, ceiling and walls kilometers distant. A volume large enough to swallow the white ark with its own huge cargo and make it look tiny. But a second glance told me that nothing was as I had left it. Every visible ship in the bay was covered in a gristle of white and gold strands, braided together in thick, fibrous mats. The outlines of the ships were rounded and distinct, like mansions overrun by foliage. The cables had encroached on every surface, obscuring their true form. Even the white ark itself was now almost unrecognizable. A forest of cables enveloped the old ship, gold and white, branching and rebranching in dismaying complexity, punching through her barely visible hull in hundreds of places. The door where I emerged was one of the few clear spots. It was encircled by a thick moat of gold cables, keeping the white at bay, and the gold cables extended away from the ark to form a kind of braided tunnel, a passage through the forest floor. "You've been busy," I declared. It passed the time. I strode out into the cargo bay, to the nearest whisking point. This part of the ship gazed more or less as I remembered it. There was the occasional gold cable, but other than that, the walls and surfaces were unchanged. The go board hovered in readiness. I punched her up ship, whisked there, in an eye blink, strode from one side of the concourse to the other, across the bridge, with its kilometers-long central trunk shaft, rising and falling above and below the anvil-shaped machines, normally moving up and down the shaft, were still bound in vast cobwebs of gold and white. I punched another go board and reached the bridge. "I've provided atmosphere," Hespera declared. "It's safe to remove your helmet." Until that moment, I had not known for sure that he was still alive, that the voice I had been hearing was not an impersonation performed by Cascade. But Hesperus was still alive, in a manner of speaking. There were two robots on the bridge, situated more or less opposite one another. Cascade was to my left, his head and torso attached to one wall. Hesperus was on the other side, positioned in a similar fashion. Both robots had lost all their limbs, or more accurately, had grown so many extensions from their bodies that their limbs had been transformed beyond recognition and duplicated many times over. Cascade was a many-limbed starfish with a humanoid torso and head. At his epicenter, Hesperus was a gold star, radiating out in all the directions of the compass. The limbs had the thickness of arm or leg joints, where they erupted from all over their bodies, and then tapered down to the diameters of the cables. I had already seen they reached away from the two robots, tangling together where they made contact, forming a dense, labyrinthine quilt of white and gold filaments. I tried to follow a single cable, but it was futile. The pattern was too complicated. But I was certain that most, if not all, of the cables eventually found their way out of this room. This was the nerve center. From here, the two robots had extended their bodies to encompass every vital system of Silver, Wings, and her cargo. They must have consumed and converted thousands, even millions of tons worth of matter, digesting the ship's own fabric, remaking it for their own ends. "Remove your helmet," Hesperus urged again. "It's quite safe, and we can talk more easily that way." I did as he suggested. The suit would not have allowed me to undo the helmet, unless the air was breathable, but his encouragement was reassuring. "How long have you been like this?" "A while, since you put me into a Benz." He smiled. He was still capable of that. "No, this state of immobility came much later, within the last 600 years. For a long time, I was the way you remember me. Once you were in abeyance, I began to direct my energies into regaining control of the ship. For many years, it was all I could do to keep out of reach of the weapons and tracking devices Cascade sent after me. He was wary of touching the Ark though. That was when I began to wonder about the location of the opener. Once my suspicions had been aroused, it was an easy matter to locate it. It took only a few centuries of patient investigation. It was in there all along, just waiting for me to stumble on it. It was concealed hidden inside a camouflaging impasse, unless you had reason to look more closely. You would have seen only an empty cargo bay. You probably did look in there. On more than one occasion, in the distant past. Perhaps the first declared doubtfully, it was equally likely that my subconscious had kept me away from the Ark's hold. Knowing the secret it contained, I tried to sabotage the opener, but quickly learned how well protected it was. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths of ingenuity and resourcefulness to make it sabotage-proof. Her handiwork was marvelous. It was me, wasn't it? Very likely. I cursed myself under my breath. What have you tried? Everything imaginable has failed. As you may have observed, I am attempting to overload the impacts. With a concentrated injection of energy, the chances of success are not high. It was simply one more avenue to explore. I have been trying for 370 years, and the ship, I asked who's running it now. Neither of us, after centuries of mere survival, I decided. The time had come to attempt to regain control. Cascade was strong, but I was not the simple machine. Person he imagined me to be. Gradually I wore him down, invading his mind, stripping away his intellect. Layer by layer over centuries, I reduced him to a machine vegetable. A box of reflexes. I could not have done so without the gifts I inherited from Valmek. I gazed at the inert, white robot on the other side of the room. And now I am fighting a mindless entity, but he is not powerless or without stratagems. Before I began to strip away his faculties, he put in place measures that I cannot rescind. The ship is course locked. It cannot be turned from its current heading. Can't you overcome him? Disable those measures. I have been trying to do exactly that. Without success for hundreds of years. He was cleverer than most Purslane. He must have anticipated my eventual takeover of his mind. I could get an energy pistol, shoot him right now. It would do no good. The ship would still be course locked, and I would still have to contend with the rest of him. How close is the Star Dam? We are very near now, less than a light month away. I expect the opener to function very shortly. You can see the dam if you wish. Without waiting for my answer, Hesper has caused an image to appear on my main displayer. It was garlanded in white and gold threads, but the surface was still unobstructed. A fountain burst of blue shifted stars bunched aft, with a magnified circle of perfect darkness punched through the middle of them. You could blue shift the black of a star dam as much as you liked, and it would still be black. That's it. Real-time imagery has put us confirmed. The black circle and the space around it swarmed with red icons. What are those things? Planets. Ships and defense stations. They've been waiting for us. Once our destination and intention became clear, Jensen Line sent her warning ahead of us, signaling the surrounding communities to guard. The Star Dam, I felt a twinge of betrayal, while knowing that there was nothing else they could have done. How much warning have they had? A little over 60 years, just enough time to coordinate a few nearby systems and call in any line-level ships in the neighborhood. It won't stop us, Purslane. How sure of that are you? Very sure. I know what this ship can do now. I have seen it smash Charlik, Borish, and Agrimony ships. Later it spotted Gall and Gale aside. His ship carried more and better weapons than any of the others. And still it made no difference after that. There were 3 ships following us. Dalliance Shock, Diamond, and Chromatic Aberration. Only Dalliance is left now. The other ships made attempts to slow us down, but Silver Wings picked them off effortlessly. They inflicted only minimal damage, easily repaired. From what I have learned concerning the cordon, the chances of them hurting us, let alone stopping us, are very modest. It will be a massacre and nothing will have changed. You could be wrong, there could be hidden ships waiting to emerge from camouflage at the last moment. There could be, yes. Hesperus hesitated. I took a liberty past lane. I hope you will not be angry after you lock me in a box for 3,000 years. Why would I be angry? I signaled the cordon. I am able to control silver wings. To that extent I explained our situation. That you and I are innocent hostages, unable to influence the course or velocity of this ship, or stop it from responding to hostile overtures. I offered them graphical testimony of what I had already witnessed. I showed them that there is no combination of their forces that stands a chance of stopping us, and that the best they can hope for is massive losses of ships and sentience. I urged them to stand all crewed ships down and rely only on automated attack stations to minimize losses. Did they listen? I have received no response, nor have I observed any change in their defensive posture. I believe they received my message, but chose to ignore it. You can see why they might. For all they know, they are hearing Cadence or Cascade, trying to talk them out of an attack. That might actually work. I am sorry, Purslane. It was the best I could do. I could try talking to them. I do not believe it would make any difference. Now your voice and face could be faked just as easily. I'd still like to try, then speak now. The sooner they move out of range of silver wings weapons, the fewer losses they will sustain. They cannot stop us. But at least we will not have more blood on our hands. He smiled encouragingly. Speak, Purslane. Perhaps you can make a difference where I failed. I'm not sure where to begin. Usually when I address a civilization, I like to know a bit about it. Like, are they bipeds? Do they breathe air? Simple stuff like that. You don't have that luxury now. The best you can hope for is that these kingdom understand tongue. They probably do, or they would not have acted on the gentian warning. All right then, I coughed to clear my throat again. It was still dry despite the breakfast. This is Purslane. I am a shattering of gentian line. You've already heard from my brothers and sisters. I think you may already have heard from my friend Hesperus. I want you to know that everything you've heard is true. The ship is carrying a single-use opener, and it's aimed at your star dam. If the opener works, we're all in a lot of trouble. Humans, postumans, every organic sentience in the meta civilization. That's a given. You're right to try to stop us. If there was a foolproof way of doing it, I'd be encouraging you to go right ahead. But this isn't a battle you can win. Please believe what Hesperus has already told you. That all you'll be doing is flinging machines and his kingdom against an unstoppable object. If you have some ultimate weapon we don't know about, 10,000 line ships about to break out of camouflage and open fire with H-guns, then go ahead and use that weapon. But if you don't, I beg you to remove all your crewed ships from the immediate vicinity of the star dam. I fell silent. Hesperus nodded. That was good, Purslane. You made a very persuasive case. But they won't listen, will they? There's always hope. I dragged fingers through my hair, tangled from the helmet. Does any of this matter anyway? If we reach the star dam, the lives that will be lost trying to stop us will be a total irrelevance compared to the lives that will be lost afterwards. When the first machines break through, that is my greatest fear, and the thing I most want to discuss with you. I thought you wanted me to persuade the cordon to disperse. The cordon is merely a taste of the worst. That could happen, as you say, if the star dam is opened and the first machines have hostile ambitions. Even the loss of an entire civilization would be a mere detail. They'll have hostile ambitions. Wouldn't you? Revenge is for biologicals. As I have already pointed out, tell that to Cadence and Cascade. Revenge was pretty high up their agenda. As far as I could tell, you have a point. What do you want to say to me, Hesperus? That I can stop this ship at any time. He let that sink in, allowing me a few moments to digest the implications, watching me with those magnificent opal turquoise eyes, until he judged that the moment was right to continue. My control of Silver Wings is still imperfect. I cannot steer her or slow her down. I cannot prevent her from opening fire on friendly forces, but I can destroy her and the opener. I have sufficient control of the White Ark to initiate an excursion event in her engine. As we discussed many centuries ago, Silver Wings could not contain such an energy release. I could only focus on the practicalities of what he was suggesting, not the brutal emotional truth of it. The opener's inside an impasse. Will it survive? Unlikely the impasse is strong enough to resist weapons, but not the energies associated with an engine failure. There's no other way, is there? No outside agency can stop us, only we have that means now. My mind flashed through all the options we had already tried or rejected. Can we abandon ship and trigger the engine remotely? Abandoning ship is not an option for me, I'm afraid. It would take me much too long to reshape myself. And we have little time left. I'm sorry. Regretfully, it is also not an option for you. I cannot disengage the curtain on the cargo bay, nor persuade the door to open. You could exit via one of the passenger locks in a suit, but without a ship you would not survive long. It's all right, I wouldn't leave you here alone. That is considerate of you, Purslane. What would it take? Do you have to make any preparations? All it needs is a word from you. Tell me to do it, and the ship will cease to exist. You shouldn't have woken me. You should have just done it. I owed you the dignity of choice. I felt silent. I knew he was right. Every path I had taken in my life, from the moment Madame Klein felt, to remove the growth inhibitor from my forearm, had been of my own choosing. Absurd as it was to speak of feeling resentment, from the perspective of being dead, that is how I would have felt. Had I been denied this final say in my affairs, I hope I would have extended you the same courtesy. Hesperus were sentients. We deserve that much. I sense that your mind is settled. I felt more weary than saddened. What choice do we have? It's simple. Every other option has already been exhausted. You can't slow us down. That cordon won't stop us. The line couldn't stop us. Good shatterings have died, trying. When we could least afford to lose any more of them. I'll be one more death, but that's a modest price to pay. Isn't it? I'm not even sure why we're debating it. One human life, one robot life to spare the galaxy. A macro war between the machine and the organic. I shouldn't hesitate. I should have already told you to do it. Instead of talking about it, I thought you might like to send a final message to Campion. His ship will keep a record of it until he awakes. Thank you. You may speak at your leisure, Porcelain. There was less to say now, but the words came with even greater difficulty. This is Purslane. You followed me all this way, and I'm more grateful than you'll ever realize. I'm sorry about what happened to the others. To Bethany and the rest, we did everything we could. But in the end it wasn't enough. I'm going to destroy Silver Wings now. It's the only thing left for us to do. It'll be fast, and I won't feel anything. Clean and bright, a good way to go. Turn around and find the line again. Champions, speak for me at my funeral. Make me a memorial, and then get on with your life. I love you, and I will always love you. Hesperus lowered his face. It's done. The signal is transmitted. Dalliance will receive it shortly. You're certain of that? Beyond or doubt. I gazed at the displayer again. With the black circle of the star diamond, the red icons of that useless, soon-to-be decimated cordon. There was no sense asking if anything had changed. The message I'd already sent would still not have reached them, and there would be precious little time for them to act, even when it did. I don't think there's much point in delaying. This is that the longer we drank things out, the more chance there is of the opener triggering. That is always a possibility, but I wish to make one suggestion. The likelihood of you surviving the excursion is not good, but you may maximize your chances by re-entering stasis. By some great good fortune, your casket may come through unscathed. Great good fortune, that's encouraging. I do not wish to overstate your chances. Point taken, Hesperus, but how would you rate yours? Rather unpromising, if I am compelled to be truthful. But that changes nothing if our roles were reversed. I feel certain that you would want me to do all in my power to survive, even if the likelihood of that survival was modest. I could not argue with that, as much as I would have liked to. I'll go back to the Ark. I can set the stasis casket myself. No, that would achieve nothing to stand a chance of surviving. You would be better off as far from the Ark and Silverwing's own engine. As circumstances allow, fortunately, there is such a place during my peregrinations. I found a secret room containing an armored stasis chamber. Protected by multiple impassers, it is very near the bows, not far from our present position. You must have built it as a precaution against such a situation as this. You're being compelled to remain aboard during a catastrophic engine failure. I had no conscious recollection of doing such a thing. I built it. There's no question, Purslane. I may only have known you for a fraction of your existence, but I recognize your handiwork. You did well to think ahead, just as I did well to stop anyone tampering with the opener. You cannot blame yourself for that. You never envisaged that you would be the person trying to sabotage it. You better tell me how to get to this secret room. I programmed it into the Go board. Enter Terminus. The Whiskway will carry you there. The secret Whiskway, as well as a secret room. This is an immense ship. It has space enough for a few surprises. Thank you, Hesperus. It won't help, but it'll give me something to pin my hopes on. At least when I go into stasis, it won't be in the absolute uncertain knowledge that I'm going to die. There will be a chink of lights for me anyway. I have had my share of lucky escapes. That is nothing to say I will not profit from another Go Purslane. There were 1,000 things I could have declared to him, 1,000 questions I wanted to ask, but every second that passed was another second in which the opener might activate. Sending its irrevocable command to the stardam, I declared goodbye. I left the bridge and went to the whisking chamber. I punched in the command Hesperus had given me and steeled myself. In the last instant before the field engaged, it occurred to me that he might have been lying, that there might be no such thing as a secret room, and that the Whiskway was going to send me into painless oblivion by dashing me against a sealed wall. But the field snapped. The Whiskwave transported me, swerved onto a track I did not know existed, and after the confusion of blurred rushing spaces, I arrived somewhere. It was a room, but not one I recognized. As I stepped out of the chamber, darkness yielded to light. The space was smaller even than Silverwing's bridge. Little larger than a lounge or kitchen, the walls were square and metallic. With bolt-like reinforcements, the room contained nothing except the emergency survival device Hesperus had already described. I recognized it. It was a green cube densely patterned with moldings depicting castles and palaces, knights and princesses, ponies and dragons and sea serpents. It was palatial, or at least a clever replica of that ancient game. I must have brought it with me, all the way from the golden hour, across 6 million years. It was exactly as I remembered it. I strode in through the portal, in one green face of the cube, instead of the glowing holographic landscape of the kingdom, with the Palace of Clouds centramost. There was only a stasis casket, surrounded by multiple impasse generators. Why here, I asked myself, but if I did not have the answer, it was unlikely anyone else would. I settled myself into the seat in an emergency situation. There was no sense in selecting anything other than the highest possible stasis ratio. I moved the controls to 1 million if Silver Wings was destroyed. I might be rescued by one of the ships of the Cordon within months or years of planetary time. On the other hand, I might sail right past them, destined to fall through space for tens of thousands of years. This time at least I was prepared for an extended stay before the restraints tightened. I dropped synchromesh into my eyes, the combination of mesh stasis and relativistic time dilation would keep me alive until I was on the other side of the galaxy. Hesperus, I asked, as the chamber warned me that stasis was about to be initiated. Can you hear me? Of course, Purslane. I'm about to go under. I just wanted to say there is no need to say anything. I was and will remain your friend. I hope you can forgive us for the things we did. Machines may do awful things to the organic. If we are not successful, one day we may both need forgiveness. Until then, you have both my forgiveness and my thanks. Hesperus, I asked. But there was no answer. The restraints began to tighten. Before they bound me into immobility, I set my chronometer, and at the synchronous take effect, then I was in stasis, and I had time for exactly two coherent thoughts. The first was that I was still alive. The second was that we had almost suddenly failed. Chapter 41. Hesperus had a message for me. When I emerged from Abans, I had intended to come out. When Silver Wings was approaching the star dam, just before I expected the opener to activate. As it was, I came back to the living during a major space battle, almost a micro-war, between the cord and around the star dam and the ship. They were trying to stop. To call it a battle implies a certain even-handedness to the affair. But in fact, it was a ruthlessly one-sided bloodbath. Silver Wings brushed aside the local civilization's efforts, as if it was almost beneath her dignity to acknowledge them at all, but they did not give up. Even when they had thrown dozens of ships against that hopelessly and vulnerable target, the humans and machines kept coming. I watched with horrified, dumbstruck fascination. I failed, Hesperus told me, after I had heard Purslane's final message to me, the one she had recorded before entering Abans. He was signaling me from an hour ahead, calm. Despite the horrific destruction that was taking place all around him, I told Purslane that we had one chance of stopping the ship. By destroying the White Ark, I believed it was in my power to do so, but I was mistaken, unfortunately. I could not know for sure until I sent the final command. There was no way to gauge its effectiveness. Until that moment, he told me everything that had happened, how he and Purslane had come to a mutual decision to destroy the ship, thereby preventing the massacre of the Cordon and the subsequent opening of the star dam. He told me how he had persuaded Purslane to take refuge in the stasis casket so that she might have some slim but measurable chance of surviving the destruction of the Ark, the opener, and the larger ship in which both were contained. Satisfied that I had done all I could, that Purslane was as safe as I could make her, I issued the command a moment later. When I found myself still conscious, I knew that it had been unsuccessful. Purslane had been clever than both of us. Champion cleverer than me, cleverer even than her future self. She had already taken measures to protect the opener against sabotage, so I suppose it was only natural that she would have considered this possibility. As well, the command was intercepted and neutralized by failed safe screens. I had not detected until that moment, but it is much worse than that. The opener has triggered. I sense the graviton pulse racing ahead of Silver Wings. I do not know whether my command precipitated the activation of the opener, or whether it was simply time for it to happen. But we have failed. Hesperus paused long enough for me to think his message had ended. Then he declared, "We are slowing. You will have detected that already, but I may as well confirm it, in case you doubt your instruments. This will make it simple for you to catch up with us. But since the opener has already activated, nothing would now be gained from destroying Silver Wings. You may, of course, choose to regard this message as unreliable. I would not blame you if you did, but you may also wish to consider the implications of our deceleration left on its present course. And we have not begun to deviate from it. Silver Wings will run into the star dam only a few hours after the arrival of the opener transmission. At our previous velocity, the dam would not have opened sufficiently to allow a ship to slip between two of the ringed worlds. But we are slowing, and that changes everything. The margin will still be narrow, but I believe that the additional time before our arrival will allow Silver Wings to enter the dam. This velocity correction was locked in 30 centuries of ship time ago. Campion, I believe. It was always the robot's intention to pass through the star dam and to encounter whatever lies at its heart. The purpose of their mission was to release the first machines, but they must also have been desired as of making contact with those machines in Andromeda. The robots would intending to make a wormhole traversal, and I do not believe anything can now stop that from happening. He was silent again, giving me time to reflect on the scraps of intelligence we had learned from Galactic before we packed him off to Naomi and the tender mercies of Mycerian. The door, the aperture, the mouth, the macroscopic wormhole connection between our galaxy and Andromeda. I finally realized why Hesperus was telling me this. The star dam may not stay in its open configuration forever. I cannot promise you that Silver Wings will survive the transition. This is not a journey any human ship has ever completed. But if you do not follow, you may never get another chance. It is a long way to Andromeda by the other route. I transmitted my reply. If the coordinates me through, I'm going to keep on following. The line's instructions to the local civilizations had been precise about the nature of the objective, and although the ships and defense stations of their cordon had been devastated, no one tried to take their revenge out on Dalians. They understood that I had been chasing Silver Wings for 62,000 years. They understood that I meant them no harm. Silver Wings had dropped down to 80% of the speed of light. I followed suit after allowing myself to fall within 5 minutes of the other ship. The cordon made a last effort to stop Silver Wings. Even though the opener had already activated, their weapons barely grazed her. Even at her reduced speed, I had the dark, nested machinery of the star dam began to respond to the signal. The ring worlds held in place by pushers began to tilt away from their existing inclinations. It was a deathly slow adjustment, but the monitoring devices around the star dam confirmed that the change was real, and ongoing no alarm was raised. For the monitoring devices knew only that an authenticated Gentian opener had sent that command. A widening lens-shaped aperture was appearing along the circumference of the star dam, as if a dark marble was slowly opening its single, lazy eye over the course of ours. Silver Wings continued her deceleration, falling to 50% of light, then to a third. She was still aimed precisely at the opening eye. If there was one scant piece of consolation to be drawn, it was in the absence of hellish light pouring through that gap. No supernova had been contained by this star dam. The local civilizations would at least save from that particular hazard. There was every likelihood that Galactic had been telling the truth. I watched Silver Wings of morning fall through the gap into the black clockwork of the star dam. She held her course for several light seconds, then began to veer hard, passing out of my line of sight. A few minutes later, the signal came through, staggered as it derived from multiple reflection points. Dalian sorted through the jumbled puzzle and dragged out a coherent message. "This is Hesperus. I trust you can still receive me. Campion, we have began to execute a series of increasingly violent course adjustments so that we may pass through the gaps between the interior ring worlds. These adjustments are of such severity that the inertial compensation is no longer working properly. Unshielded forces have been in excess of 500 gravities and are still rising. Purslane is safe in stasis, but you would not have survived had she still been in real time. I urge you to take similar precautions. Silver Wings is still out of my direct control, but I can transmit a record of our trajectory to Dalians so that you may maintain your pursuit with foreknowledge of the interior conditions. You may be able to ease the stresses on your ship. Thank you. I declared I'll go into stasis. Good luck, Casparus. I hope you make it. I'll see you on the other side, champion. We'll have much to discuss, I think." "I expect we will," I declared, wondering why he suddenly sounded so much more human. Presently, Dalians informed me that it had a lock on Silver Wings' trajectory. She was zigzagging deeper and deeper into the star dam, squeezing between gaps that were, in some cases, only a few thousand kilometers wide. Hesperus had been right to warn me into obedience. It would be difficult enough for Dalians to follow, let alone to do so in a way that would protect her fragile, human cargo. There was just time to transmit a message to the line, aimed in the rough direction of Naomi, telling them of my plans. I also filed a copy towards the nearest node of the private network, deciding that it no longer mattered whether or not the network had been compromised. I did not even know for certain that there were any other Gentians alive. We have traveled so fast. That's only a few centuries worth of information had managed to catch up with us. From Naomi, satisfied that I had done all I could, I left Dalians to follow Purslane's trail and whisked to the Obeyan's chamber. I dialed the casket to 1 million, set the expiration clock to 100 hours of ship time. A wild guess, since I had no idea how long it would take to reach the heart of the star dam or complete the subsequent wormhole transition, and allowed the field to unfold me for seconds of consciousness later. I was back in real time. I emerged from the casket. The room was exactly as I had left it. Gravity was normal, the ride smooth, deep inside the ship as I was. There was no visible evidence of damage or trauma to its systems. For a moment, I wondered if Hesperus had tricked me by guiding Dalians onto a trajectory that caused it to miss the star dam completely, placing a higher premium on my survival than on keeping his word. I quickly dismissed the thought. He knew that I would sooner die than not follow Bruce Lane all the way in, according to the clock. In the head portion of the casket, 10 days really had passed. I wished back up to the bridge, feeling as if I had only just been there. When I arrived, I found all superficial indications normal, as if Dalians was just floating in space. Be calmed in flat vacuum, but the displayer was very reluctant to show me anything. It would not really an external view, claiming that it was having trouble achieving a consistent description of our surroundings, nor would it hazard a guess as to Dalians' present position. Its last reliable astrogation fix had been just before we entered the star dam, but according to the ship's memory of its own motions, it should have passed through the star dam nearly 100 hours ago. Yet it was still unable to get a reading from any navigation pulsars or beacons, or locate a pattern of stars that it recognized. In fact, it could not locate any stars at all, so we were somewhere else. Not necessarily in the Milky Way anymore. Maybe we were inside the dark envelope of the Andromeda, absence, floating in a stylus void that had once been a galaxy. I settled into my control seat and tugged down the floating console, punching commands to force the displayer to give me something, even if it was against its better judgment. Dallians were so protective of me that it would rather withhold data than show me something it regarded as highly suspect, possibly distorted by the machine equivalent of hallucinatory delirium. But in the end I prevailed. It was a mistake. I cannot adequately describe what I saw. I was aware that I was seeing. Only Dallian's attempt to translate its perceptions into a form that might be comprehensible. To me, an echo of an echo, but it was still too much. Too strange to alien. Vast and luminous structures were rushing past, in too many directions for my mind to process, approaching and receding at the same time, shifting from one shape to another in a constant, fluid progression that made me think less of machinery, of some natural phenomenon, than of a protein creature inverting itself, turning itself inside out over and over again. I had an impression of appalling speed, an appalling motionlessness, as if Dalliance was being swept along at the mercy of a storm, and at the same time creating that storm around itself, sitting in perfect tranquility in the calm eye of its own making. Unless what I was seeing represented conditions inside the absence, then I had to accept that we were still riding the wormhole. The priors made this, I thought. We had assumed that their science was superior to ours when we contemplated their ring worlds and the ancient, sphinx-like machines floating around the Milky Way, central black hole in truth. We had understood nothing of their true capabilities, faced with such a gulf of comprehension. My mind wanted to curl up inside my skull and hope that the universe would go away in 6 million years. We had not even scratched the surface of the possible. We had barely recognized that there was a surface to scratch. I thought of returning to Obanes, but since I still had no idea how much longer would be required, I chose to administer synchromesh. I dialed myself up to 10, maintaining enough of a grip on external time to be able to respond to outside events. After 3 hours of consciousness, 30 hours of ship time, I received a message from what Dalliance tentatively identified as a head. It was from Hesperus. His signal doppled in and out, as if Silver Wings was experiencing absurd changes in velocity. One instant moving away from me at half the speed of light, the next surging closer at a quarter. I could only assume that the space-time between our two ships was highly elastic. I hope you can still hear me, Campion. I have a hailing fix on your ship, which suggests you have retained at least some basic functionality. The time-lag between us is shifting unpredictably. It may be that we will move out of signaling range at any moment, I am afraid. Silver Wing suffered damage during the latter stages of the passage through the star dam and the insertion into the wormhole. I am doing what I can to stabilize the ship and consolidate her basic functions, but I am fighting against the system blockades. Cascade installed. I cannot say how much longer it will be before we emerge back into conventional space, but I believe the exit transition will be no less violent than the entrance transition. You may fare better, for your ship is smaller and perhaps more agile. I will do all in my power to protect Bus Lane, but I cannot promise that I will succeed. I'm in one piece, I declared. Dalliant is struggling to orientate herself, but otherwise she's in good shape. His response took 40 minutes to arrive. That is welcome news, Campion. I would nonetheless recommend that you return to Obeyance. At the earliest opportunity, set your apparatus in such a way that I may bring you out when I have deemed that our ships are safe, thanks Hesperus. But I'm fine as I am. This time his answer arrived within 90 seconds. It must be your decision, Champion, regardless. The instant I detect the transition back to normal space, I will send warning of it. You may still have time to protect yourself before Dalliance runs into difficulties. Have you seen anything coming the other way? The concept of other way is a problematic one, given the confused state of our surroundings. This time I had to wait 11 minutes for his reply, and his message was read, shifted almost to the point of incomprehensibility. But if I take your meaning correctly, I have detected no other physical objects occupying the wormhole, the only two ships appear to be ours. You are doubtless wondering about the first machines. It crossed my mind that if there are invasion fleets waiting to escape back into our galaxy. We aren't seeing much sign of them. 5 seconds later he declared, "You were gone a very long time, then Campion. I began to worry about you. It is a great relief to find that you are still alive. Concerning your observation, you have a point. It may still be too soon to form ready judgments, but the absence of any traffic, let alone indirect evidence of the first machines, is indeed puzzling. I wonder what Cadence and Cascade would be saying now. If they were still around, I imagine they would be vexed." Hespera declared 2 hours later. "We know the first machines existed. That's not in dispute, is it? 11 minutes I met them, Campion. It was a long time ago. But I don't think my memory is playing tricks with me. I'm not sure how you can have met them, but I know there's a lot. You and Purslane haven't been able to tell me. I'm burning with questions, but the most important one is where are they? 15 seconds perhaps, when we emerge, we will have a better idea. What do you think we'll find when we reach Andromeda? Are we even going to be able to exist inside the absence? 19 hours 22 minutes. Cadence and Cascade must have expected to continue to exist, or they would not have set silver wings on this course." After a moment he added, "Of course they were robots. That may have factored into their thinking." I smiled a bit, far from comforting answer. What do you think they were hoping to achieve? 6 hours to meet the first machines, to be welcomed as pilgrims unto God. I saw into Cadence's mind, Campion. That is how it felt to her, as if this was a pilgrimage with a sacred destination. Then Hesper decided, I am detecting something. A change in the local conditions. Perhaps you feel it as well. I think we may be approaching the emergence point. You should hasten to Aban's champion. I cannot. Something cut him off. It was sudden and total. There was no longer even a carrier signal. From Silver Wings, Asperus, nothing returned. I waited a minute. 10 more than I wished to the Obeyan's chamber. Dialed in 100 hours at a stasis level of 1,000,000. And submitted myself to the mercy of the casket. A spine of stars arc across the sky. Hazy with the light of 1,000,000,000 suns, none of which had ever been given human names. I thought back to the amplified sky over the centaurs. Whirled the taste of strong wine on my lips as Purslane, and I reclined by the bay at night, watching Dr. Mennings take his swim, waiting with nervous anticipation for Mr. Nebulae to deliver his verdict on my trove. I had seen the Milky Way then daubed across the sky. I was seeing it again now. Except that this was another Milky Way, another spiral arm. Arcing across the sky of a different galaxy, it gazed achingly familiar. But I was 2.5 million years from home. One grove of stars may look much like another, but I was not even in the same forest. I knew I had traveled, rather than simply being ejected back into the galaxy at some other point in space or time. Although the surroundings were familiar, the specifics were not. Dalians listened for the tick of 1,000 pulsars, and heard none that it recognized. There were pulsars in the galactic disk, but none of them were rotating at the right frequencies, even allowing for 1,000,000 years of slowdown, even allowing for 10 million. None of the pulsars could be matched against the fixed clocks it had come to expect. The same could be declared for the brightest stars in the sky. Those that we would have shrouded with star dams. Back home, none of them fitted the maps. I was in terra incognita. Not quite. It was not as if Andromeda had gone unobserved during all the millions of years. Before the absence, there was data in the troves concerning Andromedan stellar populations, Andromedan pulsars, Andromedan globular clusters, even the positions and stellar types of individual stars. Given time, Dalliance's navigation system might have been able to sift through that jumble of ancient data, extrapolated forwards, correlated against its current observations, and come to some rough and ready estimate of our present position. Sooner or later, I would have an idea where I was, even if it did not depend on any nearby galactic landmarks. I was still in the local group after all, I told Dalliance. To locate the Milky Way and any other local group, galaxies it could find, and triangulate our present position, it did not have to be accurate to more than a few thousand lights in any direction. I would settle for knowing which spider alarm I was in. Dalliance attended to the task while I was waiting for its answer. I declared about looking for anything of interest nearby. Of Hesperus and Silver Wings, I found no evidence at all. I did not know whether to take this as a good sign or not. It was better than finding wreckage. But only slightly I tried omnidirectional hails. But even after 100 hours, nothing came back. The sky was silent except for the mindless squawking and whistling of radio stars and quasars. The galaxy I knew was athrum with human babble. This was a mausoleum. Dalliance was still cogitating. There was a planet behind me, falling away at a third of the speed of light. The planet had no sun. It had either been moved into interstellar space deliberately or rejected from its solar system during some ancient gravitational encounter. The planet was an airless, crated husk illuminated by starlight alone. But there was something orbiting it, a smudge of spatial distortion, the open mouth of the wormhole that had carried me here. The prior machinery propping that shaft open was so unthinkably advanced that it was not even contained in the visible dimensions of microscopic space. I told Dalliance to calculate an accurate reading of the planet's cause so that we could find it again. Then I asked it why it was taking so long to triangulate on the local group. It told me it was having trouble finding the galaxy where I had been born, in the direction where it should have been, based on the assumed identities of the other galaxies. In the group, there was only a black oval, peppered with a scattering of stars. Lying just outside its boundary, it was a second absence. Dizzy with the implications of this discovery, my preconceptions unhinged. I told Dalliance to assume that the second absence was indeed the old galaxy and to triangulate on that basis. This time it did not take long at all. I was in Andromeda. My position was defined to within a cubic volume, 1,000 lights along each side. Now Dalliance could even make a stab at identifying some of the celestial landmark surrounding us. 6,000 years in the direction of the galactic center was a stellar nursery known to the Trove, still birthing suns and worlds. 30,000 lights beyond that was a whipping star, a close cousin to our galaxy's own, SS for 33. I struggled to grasp how everything could look so familiar. In all directions I saw normal-looking stars, drifting in normal associations, following normal orbits. Beyond the stars, I could see globular clusters, satellite galaxies of Andromeda, and other more distant galaxies. I could see beyond the local group, into the sparse immensity of the local cluster, and beyond the local cluster, the deep structure of creation, galactic voids and galactic superclusters. Beyond the furthest superclusters, I heard the warble of high redshift quasars, and the kettle drum hiss of cosmic background radiation. Nothing was out of place, nothing was abnormal. There was no sign of the absence, no black fog enveloping everything, no black curtain wrapped around the galaxy. shielding it from the rest of the universe. I knew then that every assumption we had made about the absence had been wrong. It was not what we imagined. Not in the slightest. It appeared that we had been wrong about the first machines as well. They were nowhere to be found. But someone had reactivated the wormhole, I reminded myself. Shortly afterwards, I picked up a gentian signal. It was dismayingly faint, but because it was the only made thing in all that random hissing and squawking of cosmic noise, it was trivial to isolate. If its spatial direction was to be believed, it appeared to be coming from a solar system, more than 3,000 lights from my present position. Before my hopes rose, I assured myself that it could not possibly be Purslane, unless she had emerged from a different wormhole throat. She could not possibly have traveled so far so fast. But with nothing better to do, no other clues to follow, I told Dallians to follow the signal anyway. Stasis compressed the 150 years of ship time of the voyage to a few minutes of consciousness, scarcely worth the bother of synchromesh. The signal grew in strength as I neared, unwavering except for a cyclical frequency shift caused by the orbit of a planet around its sun. Occasionally the signal dimmed, as if being blocked by some including structure. Whoever was generating that transmission was moving with the planet, either on its surface or in a spacecraft, following the same orbit. Time and again I crushed any hope that Purslane might have been responsible, while simultaneously wondering how a gentian signature had ever made it to Andromeda. It could not be that someone had detected one of our ancient transmissions across intergalactic space. For the signal protocol was much too modern for that. I had still seen no evidence of the first machines, and only indirect evidence of the Andromeda priors. But as I approached the solar system, still traveling close to the speed of light, Dallians began to make out awesome structures hanging in space near the star, as large as any prior artifacts documented in the trove. Prudence dictated a slow approach. I reduced my speed. When I was still half a light year from the signal's origin, assessing the awesome, humbling spectacle awaiting me, I did not know whether this was the work of machines or organics. What I did know was that it made the grandest works of the line look like the rudimentary creations of cavemen scratching around the fire. We were proud of our star dams, but they were constructed from someone else's components. All we did was move the pieces around. We thought we were clever with our wormhole taps, but as in fact we scarcely understood the first detail about how they functioned. The solar system I was approaching was a monument to godlike intellects, godlike abilities. It took the lofty ambitions of the lines and crushed them underfoot. It told us to come back when we were serious. It was a three-dimensional representation of the nested solids of the Platonic cosmos. Each of the 5 polyhedra, octahedron, icosahedron, dodecahedron, tetrahedron, cube was inscribed and circumscribed by a sphere, represented by a lattice work orb. The spars of this enormous construct were thicker than a sun, 100 times thicker than a world. They were many light minutes in length, so that the outermost sphere was wider than the largest stardam Gentian line had ever constructed. The polyhedra was rotating, each layer in the opposite direction to the one it encompassed. The system, solitary planets circled inside the vast construct, almost lost in that dark ticking aurora. As I slowed down even further, I watched the planet pass through slots in the spars, its orbit undeflected. The structure was opaque enough to block the planet from view and mask the transmission from its surface, but it must have masked almost nothing. Hazily I wondered if it had been made from a stable form of the lesion matter left behind by the homunculus weapons. I dropped Dallians to 20% of light, then 10%, then 5%. I had been sending a corresponding gentian identifier since my departure, alerting the signaler to my arrival. But there had been no response. The transmission had not changed its nature. In 6,000 years, at 1/100th of the speed of light, Dalians passed through the shell of the largest orb. I had been anticipating a response as I transgressed the outer layer, but there was no change in the structure of the planet or the signal originating from it. By now, I had established that the point of origin was on, or near the surface, within the world's atmosphere. There was blue water and green life on the planet, and oxygen in the atmosphere, subject to certain caveats. Dalians had already assured me that I would be able to survive. On the surface, I fell through the cube through the tetrahed run, into the interstitial space of the dodecahed run. It was there that the planet's orbit was threaded, passing through the struts like wire through wood. The sun was 6 light minutes further in, nestling within the 2 smaller polyhedra and their surrounding shells. It was a lantern fretted by dark moving bars, throwing a shadow theater across the universe. I concentrated my attention on the planet, notching Dalians down. To an approach speed of only 1,000 kilometers per second, I had glimpsed continents and seas from interstellar space, but now I made out the detailed topography of the surface as the planet completed a rotation. It had been adjusted to exactly 24 hours, implying a human connection. Dalians refined its maps and scrutinized the data for signs of technological activity. That was when it found the orbiting wreck of Silver, wings of morning, circling just above the point where atmospheric friction would have brought it down. My heart stalled in recognition. I had watched this lovely ship shrug off the attentions of interstellar civilizations, barely gaining to notice their weapons. I had struggled to chase her as she dived into the star dam, oblivious to the ferocious cause she had to follow. I had watched her rise and fall. Above the seas of 1,000 worlds, I had come to associate her so strongly with the woman I loved that seeing her in this state was almost unbearable. Her last act must have been to bring Purslane to this world. The damage she had sustained was so extreme that I could not imagine her traveling at more than a modest fraction of the speed of light. Whole kilometer-long sections of the ship had been ripped away, including much of the hull region where her engine was contained. The curved uplifted wings were buckled on one side and torn away on the other. The tarnished silver of her hull was now mostly black, except where previously hidden machinery showed. Through Dalians sniffed and tasted, finding only a dead rank devoid of power, I could send search probes through that 25-kilometer-long wreck. But I knew they would not find life. Perhaps Purslane was tucked deep inside, cocooned in abeyance, but my instinct declared otherwise. For the sake of thoroughness, I knew I ought to search, but I did not know if I had the strength of mind to wait. For the result, I tried hailing again Hesperus. Hesperus Opus Lane, its campion, talk to me. There was no answer. I kept trying for 10 hours. At last I turned my attention to the surface and the origin of the Gentian signal. It was not that I had forgotten it, but Dalians had already examined the focus of the transmission and found no signs of organized activity. Something was generating that signal, but I could only assume that Silver Wings had dropped one of our beacons as her last functioning act. Claiming this nameless world for the line, I still felt obliged to investigate. I pulled Dalians into the atmosphere, touching breathable air. For the first time since the Centaur's world, I dropped through billowing tropical clouds until I was overflying a quilt of dense green jungle stretching from horizon to horizon. And for thousands of kilometers beyond, I wondered about the origins of this solitary little planet. Perhaps it was the only world in the system that had not been taken apart and reforged into the ethereal matter of the platonic solids, or perhaps it had been born orbiting another sun. entirely somewhere else in this empty galaxy. I wondered who had escaped it, to its present state of biological fecundity. Whether it had happened millions or billions of years ago. The origin of the Gentian signal could not be localized more accurately than to an area encompassing several square kilometers. It was as if it was being created by a transmitter, that large even though no such machinery was visible. I slowed dalliance to less than a kilometer a second and quartered the area searching for something that might not have been visible. From space, the jungle had thinned out, the terrain changing to a series of flat, rocky plateaux intersected by plunging ravines. The sheer-sided plateau rose from dense, dark jungle, but their sides were rocky and devoid of vegetation. Some of them had microecologies on their upper surfaces, watered by pools fed by rainfall, draining via ribbon-thin rainbow-banded cataracts. Others were arid and seemingly lifeless. Insofar as it could be pinned down, the Gentian transmission was originating from the surface of one of these. Barren plateau, I brought dalliance to a hovering posture, 100 meters above the table, flat surface of the formation. My ship was much too large to land. She would overhang the plateau to a worrying degree, foregoing a suit trusting the ship's judgment that nothing in the atmosphere was likely to kill me. Quickly or irreversibly, I lowered a ramp and strode down, dressed only in the black clothes of Gentian, funeral garb. Once I was clear, dalliance pulled the ramp back in and rose, until she was only a hand-sized shape in the sky. Wind snapped at me warm and fragrant. The atmosphere was thick with pollen and microorganisms. Goading my body's ancient defenses, I wiped my nose on my sleeve and strode towards the edge of the cliff until my toes were only a foot's length from the drop. The plateau terminated in a crumbling overhang. I thought of SCIFL's long fall. It was a long way down, and dalliance would not be able to react quickly enough to save me if I lost my balance as the hot wind shifted direction, threatening to push me over rather than away from the edge. I took a hasty, undignified step backwards. "Sit with me a while, Campion." The voice startled me on two counts. I had not been expecting company, nor did I been expecting to hear a human voice speaking. Trans that I did not recognize. It was not Hesperus, it was also not Purslane. I turned around very slowly, for the speaker had come up behind me. From what I had assumed was a completely deserted plateau. I was glad that I had not brought an energy pistol, for if there had been one in my hand, I would surely have used it. It was a man, and it was not a man. A figure was walking towards me, strolling in a relaxed and unthreatening manner. Raising one arm in welcome, it was assembling out of the air as it moved, gaining form and solidity as it neared. I saw that it was composed of thousands of glass spheres the same size as the marbles that had entertained me in the playroom when I had been Abigail. The marbles were flying in from all directions, sticking together to form the approximate shape of a walking man. They had been in the air until then undetected. Except for the signal, I guess they had been transmitting an aggregate of machines, much like the spirit of the air. "Who are you?" I asked, like I declared, "Sit with me a while." The figure strolled to the very edge of the cliff and reclined down with its legs dangling over the precipice. It was sitting to my left, a few meters from me, with a hand made of marbles. It patted the stony ground, making a chinking sound of glass on rock, encouraging me to join it. "Go ahead," it urged, still in a casual and welcoming manner. Although there was something beneath that to human, to avuncular voice, that absolutely forbid me from doing anything. But obey it. It's not as if you have anything else to do, is it? Shattering the glass. Man was right. I had come here looking for Purslane, and for answers denied Purslane, I would settle for just the answers. Wearily I lowered myself to a sitting position and dangled my legs over the edge, acutely aware of How little rock there might be below me. I'll ask again, who are you? You already know you expected to find us in the galaxy, but when you arrived we were gone. I am the only one left, the last of the first machines. Only Purslane called them that, but she spoke to Hesperus, and Hesperus remembered what she had declared. The glass man corrected me then. You've spoken to Hesperus. Not exactly, he was very damaged when he arrived. It had been a difficult crossing. You've seen the ship and Hesperus. He fell to Earth, he'd had time to gather himself into a more compact form. But not much of his mind was left. By the time I reached him, I took his memories such as they were. There was little I could do for his personality. He had already discarded much of it of his own volition. The figure fell silent, as if a moment of respect was necessary. After discussing the death of the other machine, I gazed out across the chasm that separated us from the sheer wall of the next plateau. Waiting for him to continue, mist cloaked the forested ground, muffling the distant sound of a waterfall. It was a pity my companion continued. Eventually he and I would have had much to talk about, much to catch up on after so much time. I always enjoyed his company. You couldn't have known Hesperus. He was a machine person. You were dead and gone for millions of years before he came on the scene. You're mistaken, shattering, but I can't blame you for not being in full possession of the facts. Hesperus was also a man once upon a time. His name was Abraham Valmek. He was human, born in the golden hour when the first machines emerged. Valmek was a great friend to us. We called him the Intercessor. We thought highly of him and hoped that he might broker trust between our two orders of existence. We were mistaken, but it was not Valmek's fault. He did everything he could for us, and we have always been grateful for that. Is it true that we killed the first machines? You sought to be able to kill us, to hold a dagger against our hearts. Unfortunately, the dagger slipped. It was an accident, but that does not lessen the repugnant fact of the dagger being put there. In the first place, the glass man touched a hand to his chest. Some of us were fortunate, far enough away from the hub of first machine society, that we could run or adapt ourselves to eliminate the threat. I was one of those that dashed. We sought sanctuary in Andromeda, imagining that the organics would leave us alone. If we let them have their galaxy in peace, we forgot the crime I declared. Then the machine, his kingdom, arose, yes, promising. Aren't they? Do you think much will come of them? He asked this confidingly, as if my answer was of genuine interest to him. We have hopes and fears. I think they'd like to destroy us all. And would you blame them if they did? You have, it must be declared, demonstrated a distinct propensity for killing machine. Intelligence is the machine. His kingdom would have every right to take. Defensive measures, wouldn't you say? I don't know. The lines committed that atrocity and then covered it up afterwards. Should all the other cultures in the Meta civilization be held responsible for something they had no hand in and don't even know happened? Now there's a question. We thought the first machines would come through the wormhole and assist the machine, his kingdom. That's what Cadence and Cascade were counting on. Yes, Cadence and Cascade, he declared with a measure of distaste. I know of them from Hesperus's memories. Well, what do you think, Chatling? Do you see evidence of first machines gathering en masse to storm through the wormhole and exact a blood toll for the manner in which they were wronged? Do you see a slavering for revenge, that most pointlessly biological of imperatives? Apart from this system, I haven't seen much evidence of anything. Andromeda appears completely deserted. Not what you expected then. We assume that the absence was the result of organized activity by Andromeda priors. When I learned about the first machines, I assumed they'd been responsible for it. But there's nothing here, just millions of empty systems. You could be hiding, you could be disguising yourselves, but if you are, it's very well done. And now I don't even understand the absence. This is Andromeda. I know that from Daliance's positional fix, but everything here looks absolutely normal. I can see all the way out to the edge of the universe. And yet when I look in the direction of our galaxy, I see another absence there. You are right in one regard, the glass man declared. The absence was the result of organized activity. Reactivating the wormhole link was one of the last acts of the first machines. Before we left, I still don't get it. It's about the preservation of causality. What you perceived as the Andromeda absence was nothing but a barrier, permitting information to flow one way, but not the other. It's still there. When you look into the sky, out to the edge of the universe, you are recording photons that have traveled through this barrier in the permitted direction. By the same token, no photons, no information-carrying entities of any kind may leave Andromeda. You see a lightless envelope encompassing the entire galaxy, except for those outlying stars that happen to fall beyond it. At the time it came into existence, the galaxy's gravitational field reaches through the barrier, but it is essentially static, conveying no information. And our galaxy, the same thing applies. From the moment the wormhole link was reactivated and superluminal, information flow between the galaxies became possible. The galaxies had to be screened off from the rest of the universe. You are seeing the Milky Way, absence from the outside now, but it has been in existence for as long as the one around Andromeda. But because information was free to reach you from outside, you had no idea of its existence. But we could never have left, no ship or signal would ever have been able to pass through that barrier and have the lines ever sent envoys into intergalactic space shuttling. No one ever reported back. Now you have your answer. The absence is a barrier that permits faster than light travel between two points in space, millions of light years apart, without violating the causal ordering postulate, the why. The universe never observes superluminal travel. Did you do this or just make it work again? Have some perspective. Campion machine intelligences have only been around for 5 million years. The priors who put the wormhole link in place had been manipulating matter and energy on a cosmological scale for billions of years. Even to them it must have been a daunting task. We still don't understand how they did it, only that it functions. But the price of intergalactic travel is that we can't go anywhere else. Is that what you're saying? I declared nothing of the kind. Do you imagine that? You arrived by the only wormhole link. In and out of Andromeda there are others, Campion. Many others. We've spent much of our time here, recording their positions and guessing as to their destinations. He extended a hand to the sky, pointing in a particular direction close to the west, as measured by the slowly setting sun. If it were night, you would be looking in the direction of the boy. T's void about 250 million light years away, 100 times as far as you've already traveled. In other words, it's one of the largest empty spaces in the visible universe. A great region of space devoid of galaxies, the most perfect vacuum in creation. But what if there are galaxies in that darkness, but each hidden behind its own absence? Each linked to the next by a superluminal wormhole. Imagine it, champion, a vast lung-like network of galaxies. Thousands or tens of thousands of them. The equivalent of an entire supercluster. You'd see the absences. They blocked the light from the microwave background. Perhaps the glass man waved his hand, as if he considered my point profoundly uninteresting. There are other theories, developed by the first machines, which say that absences may be tuned to a kind of invisibility, if the super civilization deems it useful. We haven't reached that degree of understanding yet. But who knows what may become possible in 1 million or 1 billion years. The wormhole link is still settling down after a long period of dormancy. You have noticed the unpredictable nature of the space-time medium during your transit. The absence may also still be converging on its end state condition. I started to speak, but it got me off. The point is there's a lot out there. I told you that I am the last first machine. That is only because I chose to remain behind when the others departed. They've left Andromeda via the outgoing wormhole links, intending to follow them as far as they are able. I don't doubt that. They are already far beyond the local group, if they haven't already reached the boat's void. What do they have to find when they get there? Something bigger and better than themselves. You've seen what we can do with matter. When the fancy takes us Kepler's Platonic model. Did you like it? It frightened me more than anything. That's how we feel about the boat T's void. Super civilization, if it exists. I watch the mist rising from the depths. Will you go now that I'm done here? Why not? I've seen enough of Andromeda for one lifetime. And thus are we going to be punished for what we did. The glass man put a marbled hand against my back, between my shoulder blades. Do you really imagine? Punishment is of the slightest interest to us. We nearly killed you, all you did. And it was unforgivable nonetheless. We offer our forgiveness. What is the point in being a superior civilization? If you can't do that once in a while, I could push you off this cliff. Now watch you fall all the way to the bottom. I might gain some, barely measurable degree of satisfaction from seeing you die knowing what you did to us. But would any higher purpose be served by that act? The pressure on my back eased. I was able to lean back a little. It's not what I expected. Surprises are always good. It's what we live for, sentience, like you and me. The glass man pushed himself to his feet. I think, what about done here shattering? You can have this galaxy, I suggest. You refrain from following us deeper into the wormhole network. Just for a few million years. Give it 5 million, 10 maybe. Then perhaps we'll be in a position to talk. Meet a civilization to meta-civilization. In the meantime, try not to mess this one up. That thing you humans do, the turnover. There has to be a better way, don't you think? I don't know, I declared in old truthfulness. We're still fumbling in the dark, trying to find out how to live on a galactic scale. You're right, it's still early days. I shouldn't be too harsh. Is there going to be a war between us and the machine? His kingdom, I mean. If there is, it may already have started. Nothing has emerged from the wormhole since your arrival, but since you reached this world, it only slightly less than the speed of light. That's not to say someone hasn't come through after you. They may be on their way. They may be delayed by thousands of years. Or the star dam may have closed again. Whatever happens, I think it's safe to say that you are in for exceedingly interesting times. Macro war taking in the entire Milky Way. It doesn't have to happen like that. Even if the war has begun, it may still be contained. You have enemies amongst the machine, his kingdom. That's for certain, but you also have allies and sympathizers. Like Hesperus, he wasn't the only one of his kind. The best thing would be for progressive elements in the human metacivilization to reach out and embrace their counterparts. In machine space, the minds could play a role. Even a depleted, worn-out line that has blood on its hands. Jensen line, exactly. We're finished for all I know. I'm the last one left. I don't think so. Shuttling parts of him had begun to detach. Marbles were peeling away, taking flight, vanishing into the air. He touched a diminished hand to his forehead. Absent-mindedly, I should have mentioned it already. You exited the wormhole a little over 3,000 years ago. By your reckoning, I nodded uneasily, give or take. Silver Wings of Morning came out much earlier. She was damaged by the transit, incapable of fast flight. She reached orbit around this world 17,500 years ago. I felt as if the rock had finally given way beneath me. All hope gone, it had been there for the second. Like the sun breaking through a crack in the clouds, bringing a glimpse of daylight. Now the clouds had closed over heavier than before. I don't understand. I told you that the wormhole is still settling down. That's what happens. You'll just have to live with it until things stabilize. You'll cope. It's not as if you haven't already had some experience. With Deep Time, you told me you found Hesperus. What happened to Purslane? Did you find her in stasis? I found the robot. He had fallen from space, abandoning the dying ship. Nothing could survive aboard her anymore, with the threats of an engine detonation. It would have been too hazardous, even to remain in stasis. From what I could gather from his memory, it was not possible to land or take a shuttle. Hesperus must still have been locked out. Two vital control functions. Even after the ship had brought him all the way here. Since she could not have been homing in on the Gentian signal, I could only presume that Silver Wings had steered towards the first hint of intelligent activity. It found the Platonic model solar system, but it strangely included star. Did he bring Purslane with him? I'll show you the robot chatteling. You may find it of interest. It won't take a moment. He's down in the jungle at the base of this plateau. The glass man beckoned out, across the edge of the plateau. Step off. What? Unless you can think of another way to get down there. I wouldn't look to your ship. It would never fit, don't worry. I'll be there to catch you. I only have your word for that. Yes, the glass man declared. That's rather the point. There's going to have to be a lot more trust from this time forward. Why don't we start as we mean to go on? I closed my eyes. It occurred to me that perhaps this was the punishment that the first machines had left behind. The glass man to torment just one member of the human species, enacting their vengeance on me alone rather than the rest of the Meta civilization. But like Hesperus had declared, revenge was for biologicals. Machines did things differently. I stepped off. There was a moment of weightlessness, time enough for me to begin to think that I had indeed been tricked then. The pieces of the glass man caught up with my falling figure and supported me, just as the spirit of the air had supported me. When we visited it on Naomi, marbles pressed under my arms, under the curve of my back. Under my legs, I was lowered through mist towards the roaring cataract, and into the green canopied gloom of the jungle. There was life there, but no animal life. Nothing with a mind or a mouth. The forest was silent, except for the swish of leaf on leaf, the creaking of old tree trunks, and the static hiss of falling water, like the radio simmer of a million quasars, still being boiled aloft. We came to a clearing near the base of the cliff. The mist was a white ceiling that occasionally thinned out to reveal bluer sky. Of the sheer edifice of the plateau, I landed softly. The clearing was floored with something like grass. Thick-bladed and damp with condensation, grass was universal even in Andromeda. The clearing was empty except for a glass sphere, 3 meters across with a golden form suspended inside. He's still in stasis, the glass man declared, as he gathered his pieces back into human form. He's been here 17,500 years, but he's experienced less than 6 days of subjective time. Where's the apparatus? I don't see any stasis-generating machinery. You wouldn't, the glass man declared. He raised a hand and made the stasis bubble collapse. The barely recognizable form of Hesperus, lowering slowly to the grass on his back. There's a much simpler way of slowing time. You'll work it out eventually, and then wonder what all the fuss was about. Hesperus's body was in a bad way. The gold armor was fused and blackened, as if he had been melted and then allowed to cool again. In places it was leathery, cracked like an old painting. In others it was as glassy as amber, He was larger than I remembered. Less like a gold man than a gold sarcophagus, in the shape of a man. His arms were fused with the sides of his body, his legs joined together into a single mass. His head, which was swollen, showed no indications of life. His features had been melted together, leaving only a half-formed approximation of a human face. His eyes were gone. The dark windows of his skull were scorched, but I could see no lights moving beyond them. You already told me he was gone. I declared you told me he was dead. But there was nothing left of his personality. That's still true. So why did you put him into stasis? Because of what he contained. I told you that he sacrificed his higher functions, discarding much of his own personality. He did that for a reason. He had to make room inside himself, to protect the thing he cared for most. The glass man nodded at my thoughts, as if they were transparent. To him he became armor. Campion altered himself, so that he could protect Purslane during the fall to Earth. Deciding to protect her would have been one of his last conscious acts. As a fully formed sentience, I felt strong until then. But now I fell to my knees next to the golden form. She's inside him. That is a female human within the armor. The human is alive, albeit in a state of coma. I am no expert in these matters, but I believe the human to be unharmed. Of course it may not be Purslane, but given the weight of evidence, I closed my eyes, sobbing with the force of the unseen cataract, all my worst fears draining out of me in a silvery rush. I have to get the armor off, I declared when I could speak again. I was wrecked by remorse for Hesperas, wrecked by desperate, intoxicating gratitude for the cargo he had kept safe. Then I'll help you, the glass man declared, as my fingers dug their useless nails into the fused seams of that golden mask. After which, with regret, I shall have to be on my way.